some string of words that was going to get you canceled, and I was setting you up for it too. I wanted it. But
We can't cancel Blitz.
yeah.
They've tried.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ian hegemony will last an eternity. If you're watching this from the multi-guest, oh, hell yeah, it's just you and if you're watching this from the multi-guest, geez, what's wrong with me? If you're requesting from the multi-guest, but then the only people requesting from the multi-guest, it was literally just the two of you. And that's chill, I think.
And
we're, I guess we're live on both YouTube
Oh, fuck.
and on
Wait.
TikTok.
Oh boy, there's an echo on my side.
Oh, there
Is
it
there?
is.
Oh, it's because it's because you're unmuted on TikTok. Okay, wait, keep talking.
Wait, testing?
Yeah, okay, you're good.
Oh, good. All right, good.
All right, let me get the lives shared.
So, funny story. So I posted this like screenshot or slideshow on TikTok just of my wife being hot and me not deserving her yesterday. Right, because it was a trend of like, it looks like my mom paid her off or whatever. And so I think everybody thinks we just got married.
Yeah. Oop.
And everybody's like, congratulations. And I'm like, I'm just doing a trend, buddy. Like, none of these are her in a wedding dress.
Oh, man.
Bro, why would you... The days of the wedding dress are over. I went to my first wedding recently. It was really nice. The ceremony lasted like 15 minutes. It was incredible.
Oh, yeah, they're super short. Yeah, the ceremony's short, and then you get to have like a 6-hour-long party with all of your best friends.
Yeah.
Great.
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe for my wedding, I'll do a Catholic mass.
That sounds fun. Like 3 hours of being sad and on your knees.
Yeah. Just like force
Is that
like
what
all
Catholic
the
mass is like?
Yeah, I'll force all the people who come to my wedding to endure it. Just for the meme.
And then no drinking at the after party, of course, because that's not godly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, let me get this blasted out.
Somebody's asking me if I watched Eurovision. No, why would I watch Eurovision?
You specifically?
Yeah,
Oh, I guess you are a Euro, so.
I guess I'm a not for long USA #1. No, but not actually.
America #1. America #1 at throwing away every advantage that they ever accumulated in the last 100 years. America #1.
Let's go squandering our resources.
America #1 at alienating its allies. America #1 at subsidizing like the Chinese laptop industry with our tariffs. Like America #1 at we're just good at like a lot of things.
Hey, haven't you heard? Dude on the top right, I think that's you, Ian, is really letting yourself go.
Yeah, I know. I am. That's true. What can I say? I'm just myself. I had myself, and then I let go of myself, and I'm
As you
letting
do.
myself go. I guess I just don't even know what the comment means. Like, in what way? like appearance and weight and like what? Like,
I don't know
what's-
either. You don't look any different than like the last 8 months, so
Yeah, I'm not sure what changed.
If you were a tree, what tree would you be?
I want to say the palm tree because it's more closely related to grass, and that's just a fun fact that I like to share. But honestly, it's not a great answer.
That's interesting. I didn't know that they were more closely related to grass.
Yeah, apparently trees aren't actually things. Like, there's no like genus of trees. It's just plants that are woody and have a single stem.
You know what? I've been looking into like classifications. There's like an aspect to like the trans argument that I've been looking into because the anti-trans person wants to say that like what a woman is like an adult human female. but historically there's like Neanderthal Homo sapien hybrids. So is this like half a woman? Or if you think it's like
Obviously.
if you think it's like the genus, if you think it's like the genus Homo, then like would like an Australopithecus Homo hybrid, would that be half a woman? Like, but
No, it's
when
the
I
kind of human. Duh.
when I look into it, it just seems like there's like literally just no clear classifications. Nobody has any idea when one starts and another stops.
Are you saying that human isn't well defined, you degenerate?
Yeah.
But stupid leftists don't even know what a human is.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, you don't even know the agony of like trans debate talk. There's like a dude, all the anti-trans debaters have like their little gotchas, and one of them is like define a human. And it's that's just a really funny gotcha, right? Because it's not like he could do it either. You know, it's you just like ask people unanswerable questions, and I feel like, I don't know, bringing it back to like the God debate, I feel like you know, that's like the presuppositionalist strategy, right? Like you just ask your opponent like these unanswerable philosophical questions, like these very much open problems in philosophy, that are in like niche fields of philosophy that don't get very much attention or research. And then you're like, solve this problem or else God exists.
Solve this problem or else trans women can't go into the women's bathroom.
Yeah.
No, Ian, you just inadvertently started a new Matt Walsh tour, so thanks for that.
What is a human? What is a human leftist?
But
Yeah, tell me, what is a fetus? Oh, it is a human organism. What's a human, you conservative idiot? Like,
yeah.
got him. That's a dolphin.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's going to be the distinguishing trait between dolphins and humans? What is it? Tell me. What's the trait
They
that
look pretty
every
similar
single
in
human
Europe.
has that not one single dolphin has?
You're gonna be like, well, 42 chromosomes. Ah, Jesus isn't a human.
There was one of my friends used to run like this like hilarious pro trans argument. It's not persuasive at all, but it's like kind of like a funny gotcha where they'll just ask them to define trans, and then they'll be like, I don't know, they'll give like a regular definition of it, and it'll be like, you know, a person whose gender is like out of line with their sex or whatever, something of that sort. And then my friend will be like, oh, you just conceded. Then it's like trivially true that trans women are women, because like a trans woman would just be like a person who's like a woman whose gender is out of line with her sex. Like you conceded. Like a trans X is an X.
Got him.
Yeah. It's not persuasive, but it is funny.
To be fair, that's the same types of arguments they're giving against us. So,
True. But hey, if you're watching this, if you have any interest at all in debating some atheist, some bad faith atheist scumbags, some godless atheist heathens,
It's true.
some unchristly atheist blasphemers,
Fruit-lacking
yeah,
atheists.
yeah. The link is
Speaking of
tinyurl.com/uaguest. Consider coming to the link at uaguest. We would love to talk to you. I definitely prefer it when you believe in an immaterial mind that created the universe, but of course, you know, beggars can't be choosers. We currently have nobody requesting to join, nobody requesting to talk to us. We would love to talk to you. Oh, wait, I know I should probably join up on the live, shouldn't I?
You should.
Probably.
Also, Christians get wrecked. This atheist no longer has no fruit. It's funny. It's picking up my orange. This is an orange that I'm holding as green.
Yeah, that looks like rotten as fuck.
It's normal orange color. I don't know what to tell you. This is very weird.
I guess that means God is real.
See, it's normal orange color.
It's spiritually green, though.
Spiritually green indeed. Daniel, it looks like you probably watched my video recently, or no, I didn't put that out. Did you just read my mind? That's crazy. I referenced the Bill Clinton. It depends on what the meaning of is in a video that I haven't released yet. I haven't released that video yet, and Daniel just mentioned it.
That's a great clip.
It's so funny. Wait, you haven't heard of this, Ian?
No, I haven't heard of that. That's a hilarious dodge. That's incredible.
This was during the Monica Lewinsky business. He was asked, like, is it true that you had, sexual relations, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, it depends on what the meaning of is. Like, and he's like, if is means was and not currently is, it's so funny.
Bro, that is...
Like, a rhetoric win? Maybe?
That's so funny. I don't know. I'm the only, like... It's definitely
Debate
before my
king
time.
president?
The only, because, I don't know, like, presidents started existing for me around, like, Barack Obama.
Yeah, sure.
But I did hear about like the Bush clip where it's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Can't shame me twice.
Don't get fooled.
The Bushisms
character.
were magnificent.
Yeah.
It was a different time to be alive.
A golden era for bad sayings.
I mean, that's when Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert kind of like kicked off, right?
Yep.
We
had
got
a guest,
a person
apparently.
here.
Yeah.
Hey, Plasma, how's it going? How old are you?
Hey, can you hear me? I'm 20. I don't know how this thing works. I usually just request on TikTok, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. I was just gonna ask. Are you a believer?
No, I'd say I'm more agnostic, but I know you're just looking for guests, so maybe I was hoping to maybe ask some questions to help clarify
Sure.
on the view. I hear a lot of Christians, or I would say believers, claim that I have no grounding for my view, kind of through this transcendental claim, and I just kind of assume that these metaphysical things are just things that happen in reality and don't really need a justification. I would say, where do you align with that?
So, I actually read a great blog post, and I think everyone should read this blog post. It's on a blog called Ex-Apologist by the philosopher Dr. Felipe Leon. He outlines this like phenomenal strategy. The blog post is titled "On a Common Apologetic Strategy," which goes over basically like how we should be approaching how do you account for XYZ thing in your worldview? So I think that you should always be starting with like the baseline, like pure physicalism. And then for any like phenomena, be it like logic, morals, consciousness, whatever it is, you should say, well, can we reduce this purely to atoms? And if not, would it be ideal to eliminate this? And if not, then you can just add like a non-God thing to your worldview, right? You can just add it to your worldview as like a platonic object. So, I don't know, like take like the laws of logic. So can you reduce the laws of logic to just atoms? Maybe. You could say that the laws of logic are like purely human conventions, that they come about just purely based on the conceptions that we have of various words. Like the laws of logic are true by the definitions that we give to various concepts. So in that sense, you probably could reduce it to atoms, but let's say you couldn't. Would it be ideal to eliminate them? Some people say, yeah, there's like genuine logical nihilists which believe they don't believe that there's like no logic, but rather what they believe is that there's no law of logic that holds in 100% of cases. And that's like really supported in the philosophical literature. There are really common exceptions to most laws of logic. For example, like the law of excluded middle is like basically impossible to defend without like a million caveats. The law of excluded middle says that like either P is true or P is not true. And that holds true in like a lot of cases, but in terms of like fictional characters, it doesn't. So if I said like either the king of France is bald or the king of France is not bald by the law of excluded middle, that's not going to be true because we can go through the list of things that are bald and the list of things that are not bald, and the king of France won't appear in either of them. So in that sense, maybe you'd be like a logical nihilist about that. You would eliminate that. And I don't know, let's say you don't think it's reduced. Let's say you don't think the laws of logic are reducible to atoms. You don't think the laws of logic can be eliminated. At that point, maybe you just add them as like a platonic object into your worldview. So either way, like there's no reason to say like, oh, well, I guess God did it, right? You just have lots of options.
Right. Yeah, I heard something interesting. Like I think it was Plato that introduced the idea that there exists a metaphysical realm in which these metaphysical truths are actual. I mean, what would you believe? Like that these things exist, or they're more just abstractions that we've applied, or do you think we discovered them? Because I guess my position is the minute matter or existence is introduced, these things are necessarily true.
I think you could hold to a Platonist view. I think it's easiest, right? You can just say that these things exist as abstract objects. I think it's probably possible to account for all these things as being like purely reducible to atoms and like physical properties. But it just takes like a lot of
Platonism
work.
is easy. The real Chads take nominalism seriously.
Yeah,
Just saying.
there's like really big theoretical virtues to nominalism, but it takes a lot of work to get there.
Sure, and I guess what would be like I agree with you guys there, but I don't think I'm a moral realist, right? I find it hard to be a moral realist, but I heard things that are consistently true, and I find to be consistently true, like unjust, as Schmurder, I guess, right? Like, or Schmurder in itself is just something that we consider wrong pretty consistently. How would you get around? Like, do you think subjective like agents can have consistent worldviews that kind of make these things seem so real?
Well, I don't know. I think that atheism is just compatible with every single ethical stance, right? You can be an ethical subjectivist, you can be an ethical objectivist, you can be an error theorist, you can be like an emotivist. I don't know. I don't think atheism is committed to any. Like, the only one you couldn't be is divine command theorist, but literally nobody in the literature takes divine command theory seriously. It's just a silly position. Like, you're unironically committed to the belief that if God commanded you to I don't know, slaughter a whole bunch of babies because 400 years prior their ancestors lost a battle to your ancestors, then you would be on the hook for actually doing that, and that would be like a good moral thing to do. It's just a silly position that leads to silly outcomes. So nobody really takes divine command theory seriously, and as an atheist, you can just be any of the other positions.
Right, and then I mean, that's really all I have for like the question side of things. Like I don't know. I struggle, right, because I deconstruct it out, and like the fear of hell was something that got to me. And the wise words, I think it was Alex O'Connor said, like, well, a just God is going to send me there anyways, and then Christianity is true. I deserve to go there. Do you think that it, like, is an actual like objection to like the fear of hell, or like would you say that's a good way of thinking of the fear of hell?
Well, I think hell is like one of the least defensible doctrines, right? Like, imagine what sorts of crimes you would need to commit to get the punishment of torture forever. Like, what sort of punishment, what sort of crime justifies that punishment, in your opinion?
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that finite actions, right? Even like the most grandiose ones. Like I could say I think anything involving a child might deserve that, but
Have you considered not believing in God
Yeah.
is deserving of infinite punishment?
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that's true. Like that can even hold, right? Because God created this universe and those properties around me for me to not be convinced of a God. So I find it hard to believe that someone who actualized this is just going to punish me for the rest of my existence.
Yeah, there's just
And
like a number of problems, right? Beliefs aren't voluntary. You don't get to choose your beliefs. If beliefs aren't voluntary, then it's like unbelievably unjust to punish someone for their beliefs. You know, God could easily come down and reveal himself to you and make you a believer instantly. Instantly.
Right,
But
I find
I think if it would take literally nothing for God to do that to avoid you from going to hell, then it's unjust to send you to hell.
yeah, like I don't believe in free will, but let's say I do, and I know someone says this would be a violation of your free will. I I I guess, right? Like
Why? Why would I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think that it's a violation of your free will for God to reveal himself to you, and thus that leads to you being convinced, any more than it's a violation of your free will for God to not reveal himself to you, and thus you're not convinced.
Right.
In fact,
and he did do that to quite a few of the patriarchs, right? But like, if
Like
he's
Paul,
willing to do it for
right?
the patriarchs, I don't see why it would be somehow okay for their situation, but not ours.
You can actually make a pretty good rhetorical point on this one, namely that we generally consider, like in society, we generally consider informed decisions to be in some sense freer than uninformed decisions, namely that we only consider it genuine consent if it was informed consent, for example. So by not giving you the information of his existence, he's actually reducing your free will. He's not allowing you to make the correct choice because he hasn't provided the information necessary for you to make that choice. And that's usually a pretty big rhetorical win. People usually don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah, I was reading like a paper on determinism, and because like I got into like some silly like debate with a creator kind of. It was like saying like, well, you can't have rationale in your deterministic view frame. I was like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, I feel like you can have like a program set of, even if God was real or whatever, but like you can have these conditions that are true that lead to reason. I feel like it's harder to have like valid reason and free will. Wouldn't it just like be arbitrary in that sense?
I'm not sure I understand.
Like it's hard. I'm not like the good at like viewing or voicing my thoughts when it comes to these like things, but like a calculator, for example, it's programmed, right, to give you the right answer every single time. So using that as an analogy for like reason, I feel like determinism like almost posits a better justification for reason than free
Like
will.
when we say reason, do we mean like the reasoning process, or do we mean like the principle of sufficient reason style reason?
More along the principles, and I would even say rationale.
I feel like
Right.
I'm still are you talking about like a rational reasoning process?
Yeah, I would say it's.
Well,
Like I
yeah,
said,
like
I'm
your
trying to
brain
like.
evolved this way, right? Like your brain evolved to make these connections, yeah. And also, this is a great defeater to presuppositionalism. Either it's the case that your like senses are reliable, in which case you have access to all this information, or your senses aren't reliable, in which case the presuppositionalist can't read the Bible, right? Like the presuppositionalist, if our eyes aren't reliable, then it's not like the presuppositionalist knows what the Bible said, right? Like the presuppositionalist comes to the knowledge of the Bible through their eyes, through their senses. The
Right.
alternative is they say, well, God gives you these perfect senses, which is like one, obviously not true because there's tons of information that our senses don't pick up. But two, at that point, you can just say, well, evolution gives us senses. Like evolution gives us these senses in your worldview. So both of you have an explanation, but we have other guests, so we'll probably move on to someone who doesn't believe. But we appreciate you coming on up here.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yep, of course.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We have Duke to bring up.
Yep. Hey, what's up, Duke? How's it going?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I believe, well, I don't believe in God. I'm agnostic, but I do have an argument for God.
Sure. What's the argument?
I think I ran it by someone in the panel before. It's from the axiom of regularity, if you're aware of what that is.
Oh, Duke, are you in my Discord? Did you just
Yeah.
post this? Okay, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, sure. What is it?
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so firstly, premise one, we assume the axiom of regularity. Premise two, there's a set C such as C contains all logically dependent things. Premise three, via the law of excluded middle, C is either going to be logically dependent or logically independent. Premise four, assume for the reductio ad absurdum that C is logically dependent. Premise five, if C is logically dependent, then C is an element of itself. Premise six, therefore, premise five elicits a contradiction with premise one. Premise 7, therefore, C must not be logically dependent, it must be logically independent. Premise 8, C must be logically independent, and it's a logically independent C that grounds all logically dependent elements. And conclusion, that's just going to be what we define as God. So God is logically necessary, as he follows from these axioms.
Oh, sure. So this set is an impossibility just via Cantor's theorem because there would be for example, this would include this would include like all true propositions, but of course there would be like true propositions about the power set, which would be in violation of Cantor's theorem, which means that the set itself is an impossibility.
Yeah, just so I know, like understanding, isn't the power set a set of all possible proper and improper subsets of the set itself, correct?
Yeah. So the power set is just like all possible combinations of the elements.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna like be a rebuttal. Maybe you
Yeah,
want to repeat it.
so the issue is roughly that any subset of a set of logically dependent things is itself going to be logically dependent. And so every subset will also be contained within the set. And so because the whole set is itself a set, or because the whole set is itself a subset, it must be contained in itself, and you run into an issue there. In fact, that actually directly contradicts the axiom of regularity itself, and so just by construction, the set can't exist. And this is roughly what I was getting at in the second paragraph, but I hadn't thought about it directly in terms of subsets and sets.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just so I know I'm understanding, you're saying that because there's a power set of C itself would be a subset, I presume like a proper subset, such that I guess it would be dependent, so it'd also be instead of logically dependent things. Therefore, it's still violating the axiom itself. So we can't say there's a C that's logically independent because it'll be dependent, correct?
It actually doesn't even require a power set language at all, now that I think about it. Although you can probably get Russell's paradox out of this too. But more so just that any subset of a set of logically dependent things must itself be logically dependent, of course, because if you change one of the elements of the set, then the whole set changes. And therefore, the set that contains all logically dependent things must contain itself, because the set itself is a subset. Subsets can be the whole set. And so now you violate the axiom of regularity, namely you have a set containing itself. So premise one is out the door.
Yeah. Well, this seems like a view of identity of sets. It's like a very akin to mathematical essentialism, which is like 2 is going to equal 1 plus 1, or like 2 can't equal 1 plus 1.5 plus 0.5 because obviously 2 equals 1 plus 1. But we know that's false. That's one of the issues that mathematical essentialism runs into. When I refer to a set such as C, I'm saying it's going to be defined by its set rule rather than the cardinal number or the element within the set. For instance, we can say the set of all x's. And
but
x is
the axiom, isn't it the axiom of axiom of what is it? The one where you unwrap it and then compare elements.
What is that, pairing? You're from?
It's not pairing. It's a comprehension type axiom.
Oh, schema.
Yeah, it might be the comprehension schema. Anyway, if two sets have identical elements, then they're identical sets, and if they don't have identical elements, then they don't have then they're not identical sets, right?
Yeah. Well, bear in mind the premise one doesn't actually invoke all the axioms of ZF. It only invokes one.
But to be clear, you're using an axiom of, presumably, like in order to make this argument. So are you just saying that like? Let me back up. What set axioms are you then using here? Because you can't have like set comprehension, I guess, as an axiom if you're going to make this, if you want to make this work. But if you don't have set comprehension, you don't really have a theory of sets.
Yeah, I was just under the impression I can just use axiom of regularity. Like I'm not sure.
How are you defining what a set is? How are you defining what it means for a thing to be within another set?
Oh, yeah, there will be a comparison. They wouldn't be a schema. I'll have to look at my notes. 1 second.
Because what properties do these sets have?
What do you mean, like cardinal numbers, like set rule?
Well, yeah, I mean, like if you're saying that you're not using like the standard ZF axioms as axioms that apply to these sets, then you must be using something weaker or something different. And so then the question is what set? I assumed when you posted the argument, I assumed that you were using standard ZF axioms here. But if you're not using those, then I don't even know how to. Oh, he left. Or no, he's here. I don't even know how to make sense of the argument, because there's a lot of business about sets going on in the argument that is just not super clear. Like in what sense could a set be? Could a set have different elements but still be the same set?
Oh wait, is he?
I don't know if he's gone or not.
Damn.
Oh yeah, he's gone.
I think he dropped.
All right.
It was probably an accident, but we can always continue this in the Discord if he has more questions. He posted this question earlier in the Discord, like an hour and a half ago.
I believe we have. Oh wait, how do I? We should probably read super chats, right?
Oh yeah, good point.
Tuesday, isn't it?
Hey, that's racist.
Oh yeah.
Against redheads.
Yeah. Okay. Can't say that. Oh, the link is not in the description. Gosh, flipping dang it. I'm so silly. I'm a
How are
silly
people in here?
goose. One sec. I
Well,
can add
there's
it.
the background. The link is in the background.
Let me.
Oh.
I guess the link is in the background. Yeah. I
But
apologize.
definitely should put it in the description.
Optimus Rhyme says, Justin, in Zechariah, when God says he's going to send Elijah, what does that mean? And Jesus says the same thing in Mark. Is Elijah the actual Messiah?
No, no, I don't believe so. So he's referring to Malachi chapter 4. And in Malachi chapter 4, it seems to be he's suggesting that the actual Elijah, the one that was called up into heaven, is going to come back. Remember, he never died. He's still like cruising around up there in the fiery chariot.
Mm.
And the goal is to come back and reform the hearts of the people, you know, to bring them back and prepare them for the Messianic age.
One sec, adding this to the description. Okay. Should be good. Okay, wait, it should be in the description now. Daniel, thank you so much for the $2 on YouTube. The shoe missed, but I still think about it daily.
He doesn't get the reference.
I don't.
Somebody chucked a shoe at George Bush and he dodged it.
Oh, shit.
Live on camera. Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I heard about that. Bay, thank you so much for the 2 BGN. I don't know what a BGN is, but can the axiom of choice exist platonically? I don't see why not. If you admit platonic objects, although
Yeah, but then so then are you saying that the axiom of choice is true?
I have no idea. Gosh.
The axiom of choice is famously one of those things that you can either accept or reject and you still get good mathematics out.
Interesting. Optimus Rhymes, thanks so much for the $5. And is my little
name.
finger is thicker than my father's loins small PP insult. I just finished the Old Testament for the second time, and I have so many questions. What do you think, Justin?
That is one of the best insults in the entire Old Testament. I don't know if anything quite tops that. So big W on that. Thanks for reading the book, actually.
Who says this and to who?
If I remember correctly, this is Solomon referring to when he's essentially questioned about whether or not he's going to have any of the work programs that his father had. Let me double check on that.
Damn, that's crazy. That's a crazy insult. And then Dion says, Dion, thank you so much for the $2. Christ is a lie told for access to your money and kids. True. And with that, we have a very special guest. It's Otangelo time. How's it going, Otangelo?
Hi, yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
Wow. You must have collaborated with Scientific Snitch to get the microphone. Do you have like a better mic somewhere?
Yeah, let me check my.
It's
Is it
like
better
like this,
now?
huh?
Is it better now?
Yeah, it is better. Yeah, it's much better now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Do you have any reason to think that God exists?
Well, I think there are so many reasons to believe that God exists. I mean, the better question would be, do you have good reasons to believe that the non-existence of God is a superior and more plausible explanation for our existence? I mean, you are making here a comparison between an entity that actually has causal power compared to none.
Why should I?
So what you need to defend is that a non-entity would, for some reasons, be a more plausible explanation.
Why should I
Can
think
you
that God has
provide
causal
that?
power?
Can you provide that explanation to me? Otherwise, you need to stick to the claim that the universe has
Why should I think
always
that God has
existed.
causal power?
I'm sorry?
Why you said God has causal power? Why should I believe that?
Well, the thing is, you start with this starting point. we exist. The physical universe exists, life exists, consciousness exists, and it requires an explanation, right? So we want to find out why there is something rather than nothing. And you have basically here two competing hypotheses. One is that there is a causal power, and the other is that there is none. And if you think, or if you are skeptic towards the proposition that a causal power is a more plausible explanation, then you need to provide good reasons why the no God hypothesis is superior.
Via what mechanism does God cause
explanation.
things?
I'm sorry?
Via what mechanism does God cause things?
I would say through his power and his intelligence. What is
So
your
he just
alternative?
does he just will
what
things?
what would be your alternative?
Well,
Don't you know,
so
Ian?
let me just
God
give you
just has causal power.
well, yeah, setting aside the fact that just straight up didn't answer my question. My question was, why should I assume God has causal power? And you went on like a ramble about how God has causal power, but that doesn't tell me why I should think that he actually does have causal power. I'll give you reasons to think that he
Yes, what
doesn't.
is your
Presumably,
alternative?
if God has will, if God
So
brings
what is
things
your
about by
alternative, Jan?
wait,
If you
hold
are
on,
skeptic
hold
that God
on,
is
hold
the
on,
cause, what is
hold
your
on,
alternative?
hold
That's what I
on,
asked.
hold
Oh,
on.
Tangelo,
If
chill.
God wills things, then he can only be willing one thing in one state, which means that he can only will one thing ever. And it's going to be the same thing that he's willing eternally, which means that God actually doesn't have any causal power.
So Jan, I have asked you previously a question which you have just dodged and answered me with another question.
Damn,
So I
Otangelo's
would
getting
like to ask you
rhetorical.
again, if you think that the God hypothesis is inferior to the no God hypothesis, then my question to you is, how do you think that the no God hypothesis is a more plausible explanation for God's existence rather than a creator?
What? Wait,
Snuck it in right there. Snuck it in.
How do I think the no God hypothesis is a better explanation for God's existence? Wow,
No, not for God.
incredible
No, not for
question.
God's
Imagine
I
reading a
didn't say.
script that says that.
I'm sorry. I didn't say for God's existence. I said for our existence, for the existence of the universe, life, and
I think
consciousness principally.
I think that's what
If
you
you
meant to
remove,
say,
if
but that's
you
not what came
remove,
out of your
I
mouth.
didn't
Okay.
finish.
That's
I
fine. That's
didn't
fine.
finish. I didn't finish. So,
I
if you
mean,
remove,
for your own good, it never gets
God,
better even when you do finish.
wow. So you guys are three guys which interrupt when the interlocutor is talking. You're not listening,
Wait, you
and then
just
you're
like tried to
making
fucking
fun
steamroll
about
me.
something
Why
that
did
The
you
I
get to
crying
do
didn't
is
say.
this?
wild.
Wow. I mean, I can ask again because my question was
Yeah.
very coherent and logical. So I ask
Mhm.
again, and please do not interrupt me. So, if you believe that the God hypothesis is not plausible, then you have to stick to the no God hypothesis to explain the existence of the universe, life, and consciousness.
Sure.
So, my question again is, how do you want to support
Otangelo,
this hypothesis,
Mhm.
and
you've
why should it
already
be
read your script 3 times. What do we need God
well,
for?
it's not a script. I am not
What
reading a
does
script.
what
I
does
am
the
just
invention of a sky fairy do for us that we can't explain it without it?
so
Let's go.
why
Wait, let's just go
are
one
you
data
unable
point.
to
Wait, I'm so sorry.
simply
Let's just go
answer
one
my
data point at
question?
a
Why are you
time.
dodging?
How about we
That's the
do? How about we
first
just talk about the
time
universe really
that
quick?
you guys are
So
dodging my
I
question.
tend to
Why?
lean towards
Are you
the
so
I tend to
afraid
lean
about
towards the
justifying
perspective that
your
the universe
claim?
has always existed. Do you think that God was eternally willing the universe into existence?
So you are claiming that the universe always existed.
Well,
Okay.
that's dodge number
So,
one. My question was, do you think that God eternally willed the universe into existence?
wow. I mean, hey, that's not how a discussion and a conversation
That's
works.
dodge
You are
number
not
two. The question
bombarding me
again
with
was, do you think
questions
God
without
eternally willed the universe
answering
into
any of my
existence?
questions.
That's
So I
dodge number
started
three. Do you think that God
first.
eternally willed the universe into existence?
Well, Jan, I asked you first the
And I
question. You simply
answered
dodged
first,
it.
and now
No,
you
you
dodged for
didn't.
the
You
fourth
simply
time. That's
dodged it.
dodge number four. Do you think God
No,
eternally willed the universe into
you are
existence?
dodging my question.
I
Hey,
already
why are
answered
you
your
unable
question. I
to?
already
Hey,
answered your
why are you
question.
unable to actually
I
answer. and
literally
warrant
already answered your question.
claims of no-God hypothesis. Are you unable
I just
to do
answered
that?
I
Are you
already answered the
afraid,
question. I
or
already
what
told
is
you that I think the
happening?
universe always existed. You're not tracking.
Okay, good. So let's stick to that
Yeah,
claim.
wait, do you think that
So the
God eternally
universe
willed the
always
universe into
exists.
existence?
Okay, so let's start with this. You
He'll
claim that
never
the
answer your
universe-
question.
Wow.
Every conversation with
So
Otangelo goes the
3
same
guys
way.
interrupting me constantly, and that's not how a conversation works. I'm alone trying to answer questions,
So,
and you
but
guys
to be
interrupt
clear,
me.
Otangelo,
You didn't
bombard
answer
me
a
with
single question yet,
questions.
with
Otangelo.
respect, you've asked a lot of questions and answered 0.
Well, it's maybe time that you guys answer questions from our side.
Why don't we do one for
think
one?
so?
So
Yeah.
Ian just answered your question. Why don't you answer
No,
Ian's
he
question?
didn't. I'm not satisfied with his answer, and I'll answer you why. I think that the
You can ask
Now he
infinite
answers the question.
questions as long as you're not
I think
satisfied
that
with the answers.
eternal universe hypothesis is completely bankrupt.
Oh,
Okay,
That's
you can
not
think
the
that, and we can
scientific
talk about that
consensus
afterwards. But
today.
first, answer
That's
Ian's
not
question.
the scientific consensus. So you
Appeal
have
to majority.
already
First,
Make
answer
a real
Ian's question,
argument.
and then we can talk about the bankruptcy of the infinite universe, whatever. Is that fair?
Yeah, sure. That's
Okay,
that's
so
interesting.
Ian's question was, did God eternally will the universe into existence?
I'm not interested to talk about God right now.
he won't do it.
That's dodge number 5.
He's
Yeah.
gonna dodge it again.
D'Angelo, I'm
What?
sorry. It looks
I mean,
terrible when you dodge the question
guys-
5 times in
you
a row.
guys
Like, it looks
think
horrible
Imagine
for
being-
that
you.
you can direct
Imagine
this
being filled with the power
like-
of the Holy Spirit, but he can't empower you to answer a simple question.
Like,
Yeah,
wait,
this is
what
not
do you
an
mean you're not interested in
interrogation
talking about God? That is
three
the topic
guys
of
trying
the
to
discussion.
interrogate me without answering
Wait,
any
Otangelo,
pertinent
to
question
be clear,
whatsoever. So
Ian
that's
did
not
give
how
you an
it
answer.
works, guys.
Otangelo, to be clear, Ian did give you an answer even if you don't like it. It's not an interrogation if we ask you one question and you refuse to answer it.
Well, you
just
can make
you just said,
whatever claim you
Otangelo,
want.
I wasn't done.
But I'm not
you came
satisfied,
in, you came into
I am not
you
being
came into a
able
live
to
stream
answer why
saying
I'm not
God isn't real.
satisfied.
And then when we asked
You
you
know?
if God is eternally willing the universe into existence, you said you're not interested in talking about God. I'm sorry, that's the topic of discussion. If you don't want to talk about that, you can leave.
Okay. Goodbye, guys. You guys are close-minded.
there it is.
The one question that collapsed Otangelo's entire worldview.
Cooked.
Anything about God apparently would have done that, by the way. We should bring up David.
Damn, that's so sad. I wanted to get like rhetorical with him. Hey, but welcome up, David. David, are you there? You gotta unmute, David.
I feel like I'm not in the center.
David?
There we go, more center. Oh, now you can see the side of my...
Scott, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Can you
hey,
hear me?
how's it going?
Welcome,
We
Scott.
can hear you. How old are you?
I just want to start off saying, you guys I dig the channel. I love the open debates. I'm not coming in here hostile at all, but I do have a line of logic that I've always used. I feel like, for example, if you want to look for evidence of God or creation, we can find it in certain aspects. We see it in nature. We see it in music because it is aspects of divinity. Stick with me here a second. So my line of logic I came up with this a long time ago. So I can only assume you guys believe in science, correct? You guys are firm believers in science.
Well, we think
I
science
like
is like a good
science.
methodology. Yeah.
Perfect, because I think the same way. So I'm going to use this logic. Space to be represented. If you ask most like astrophysicists, they would agree that this description would kind of represent space. You took a big plexiglass box and you sucked all the air out of it, which you created a vacuum. That would be a good representation of the universe. Most scientists would agree upon that. Now, if I took this plexiglass box and I sucked out all the atoms, I removed everything out of this plexiglass box. That a little nervous right now. I don't know why, but
You're okay.
Yeah, you should be. No, I'm kidding. You're doing great. You're doing
No,
you're
yeah,
doing
dude, come
perfectly
on.
fine. You're doing so good so far. You're doing 100% totally fine so far.
So, anyways, so if we take this plexiglass box that we've sucked all the air out and we've created a vacuum, would you agree that that's a good representation of the universe in space? That's essentially what space is. It's a big box in a vacuum. Correct?
Not really. I mean, like, there's stuff in the universe, and the universe, as far as we know, doesn't have edges.
But what I'm saying, but there is, if like I said, this concept I'm bringing forward, this is something I've taken from science community. If you took a box, you sucked all the air out of it, created a vacuum, you would kind of have a human aspect of what space is. Now, this box, if there's not a single atom of particles, anything inside of it, and you put it up on a shelf for hypothetically 4 billion years, if you came back to this box, you would have nothing in it still. There'd be nothing in the box that had nothing, right? No atoms, nothing. But
Yeah,
if
we
you
agree with
put,
that.
so let's say, for example,
Kinda.
I always do this for a joke. But let's say I picked a booger out my nose and I put it in the box, right? And then I put it back on that shelf for 4 billion years, and I come back. There's going to be stuff inside that box. Call it the Big Bang, call it whatever you want to call it. But somebody had to put something into our box to make things grow.
So I feel like the problem that you're trying to solve isn't a problem for us. So we don't believe there was ever nothing.
I don't even know I don't even know what the problem is.
But what I'm saying is this: if space was a big empty box, somebody had to put something in it. God had to put something
So-
in this
But
box.
we don't believe
So
it
to-
was.
So
You don't.
and
So
to
you,
be
you
clear,
so you don't.
even-
So you just believe the universe just matter came from nowhere.
No,
And
there
to be
was
clear-
never a state in which there was nothing.
And
Sorry,
to be clear,
Plugs.
the universe, like even a vacuum, isn't empty. There's quantum fields in there always.
But yeah, but we're talking about actual matter, though.
Yep.
What do you think matter is made out of? Matter is made from quantum fields.
Well, there's matter, there's
Specific
antimatter. What I'm
state.
trying to say is this: is that space is an empty box. So universe has always just been there. It's constant, right? Is that what you're saying?
I mean,
Not
There's,
whether or
there's
not the universe
never
has
been a
always
big
been
bang
there,
or nothing. What I'm saying
I
is
think
that
everybody here
somebody had to
thinks that
put
the Big
something in
Bang
the box.
is a real thing.
What's that?
So look, whether or not the universe has always been there, you can have a let me rephrase. Whether or not the universe had a first moment, you can have good, sensible physical descriptions of a universe that has matter in it and doesn't require a god. Whether or
But
not
where did
there's
the
a
matter
first
come
moment.
from? But where did the matter come
Well,
from?
if the universe has always existed, then it just came from the previous matter. And if the
But
universe
where does that
had
matter
a
come?
first,
You got to see what I'm saying. Somebody had to put something in the box.
Please. And if the universe did have a first moment, then you could just say it came from the matter that was timeless prior. And like in either case, you don't really need an explanation. You can always provide an explanation, like an immediate explanation for where did the matter here come from? Well, it came from the matter that was there. Where'd that come from? Well, and you can just keep going back forever. There's never an issue.
Well, so it's just, but where did it come from? Though it has to come from somewhere.
Came from the
Who
previous
made it?
matter.
Who put it there? And I guess what I'm saying is this is like,
It was never made. That's the point. If the universe always existed, it was never made.
that doesn't. You got to explain that one. Explain that. Can you explain that?
Would you say that under your worldview, would you say that God has always been there?
Well, in the sense of like, see, this is where I get conflicted with myself. Is like this. It's like if you look at nature, correct? I believe that you can find divinity in nature. So, for example,
But
in summertime,
that wasn't the end of my line of questioning. So I'd prefer if you could just answer the question, and then we can get to that. But would you say that God has always existed? That God has existed eternally in some sense?
I believe something had to start this all. Something had to just doesn't like.
Okay, so whatever you think was the start of it all, do you think that thing always existed?
Yes.
Okay, and even though you think because you think that thing always existed, it doesn't require a beginning. It doesn't require something to make it, right?
Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end, though. Can you name me any other example that just happens and never exists?
Scott, under your worldview, God does not have a beginning, middle, or end.
No, I never said that. There has to be a beginning to God.
You would say that God had a beginning
to all of it. Like I said, and this is the part
then what
where
caused God?
we don't know. This is the difference between science and religion. One requires fact, one requires belief. And that's kind of the big mystery.
In what sense is it a God then?
Let's see. What is
it? A beginning? In what sense is it a God if it had a beginning?
I mean, what's the sense of a universe if it didn't have a beginning? There has to be a beginning to everything. What I'm saying is,
let's put it like this, right? Let's just like simplify this for the audience. Either we can believe in like a universe that always existed, or we can just believe in like a universe that existed for a finite amount of time, created by an infinite chain of gods. You can either believe in infinity gods in one universe, or like just one universe. Why would I ever want to believe in infinity gods?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, What do you mean infinity God? I don't.
Because you're gonna
I mean, I
like
guess
God's gonna
I
have
feel
a
like
creator, and
God
then
in the
God's
mono
creator
sense
is
is a
gonna
very
have a
human.
creator, and then God's creator's creator is gonna have a creator, so on and so forth for infinity. It's an infinite chain of gods.
So yeah, you've done the same thing we've done, except are just calling it God, and we're saying no, that's an unnecessary step.
It's all too intelligent, though. In my personal opinion, it's all too much to be coincidence. That's what I'm saying. There has to be some form of, like I said, my whole theory has always been if
What's too
space
much?
is a big, like I said, my whole theory has been if space is a big empty vacuum box, somebody had to put something in it. It had to be
Does
put in there.
something that you think put all the stuff in it, you don't think always existed. So what put that in it?
Maybe it all started at once. Or who knows? Maybe somebody put a booger in our box and we just don't know who it is from another day. Who knows?
Or
I mean, at
what
that
if
point,
what
we're
if the
going to
box
science
always had a
fiction
booger
if
in
you
it?
want. I mean, at that point, we're going to science fiction.
Why couldn't the box have always had a booger in it?
Because somebody had to produce it.
Why do you assume that there has to? I mean, okay, so let's not talk about a booger then. Let's just talk about like, let's talk about like an electron, right? Why couldn't the box have just had an electron in it forever?
Because we know space it's empty.
Space isn't empty.
Do you believe in
the
Big
point. It's
Bang?
not.
Like, I guess my next. Do you believe in like Big Bang as far as that scientific aspect?
The Big Bang doesn't say
focus
anything
up,
about
Scott.
space being empty. The Big Bang doesn't say anything about space being empty ever.
But once again, we're all speculating at this point because nobody was there. What I'm saying is, somebody had to put something in this box, my friends. Like
Why?
somebody had to put something in
Why
here,
couldn't
whether
why
it's
couldn't the
God
box
or
have just
whether
been
it
full
was
to begin
something
with?
else, or
Why
it
couldn't the
mattered.
box have just been
Matter
full
just
the whole time?
existed.
Why
matter
couldn't the box
just
have just
existed?
Why couldn't the box have just been full the whole time?
Because it doesn't just okay. If we have science and physics, it doesn't work like that. You just don't.
It does
Sure,
work
does.
that way.
What's the issue?
We just don't manifest stuff with our thoughts or just hey, it exists
It's
now.
not manifested. It was just always there.
If it's always there, it
It never
doesn't come
began.
into existence.
But how do we know it's always there though? We don't.
What I'm asking
telling
is, how do you
what I'm
rule
trying
that
to
out?
say is that
How do
somebody
you rule that out, Scott?
rule what out.
The idea that the box could have always been full.
But how can we be so sure that it's always been
That
it's always
wasn't
full?
his question.
I'm not saying we can be sure that it was always full. I'm saying, how can you rule that out?
I can't. Well, what I'm
Okay.
saying is if you go off of science in the way that if you go across the scientific community, they will agree that the empty box, like that's representation
will
I've
not.
gotten from science community.
Blitz
They're
doesn't
like,
know
hey,
anything
so-
about science.
So to be clear,
Oh,
if
well,
you
there's
ask
no
any
need
cos-
for
if
attacking.
you-
See, here's the thing you guys do. You guys make these little passive aggressive snippets,
Scott.
like kind of like
Scott,
petty young
I-
girls a little bit. It's kind of
Scott.
annoying.
I
You
said
gotta stop
Blitz.
that.
Yeah, we're very catty.
No, I know.
that is true. It is a
For
little
views,
true.
I get
But
that.
Scott,
It's kind-
Scott, if you
I get-
ask
I
any
get-
cosmologist alive, if you ask any cosmologist alive today, I would put money on this. Not a single one would ever tell you that there was at some point in the past nothing. Not a single one alive would tell you that, and I would put money on that.
I don't know. Like I said, I feel like my representation is a good. Is like I said, you can ask around. Most scientists would agree with that. They'd be like, yeah.
Can you
no,
name me
space
one
is
who
a box.
would? Can you name me one who would?
I don't. What the scientists that people I went to school. I don't remember their names and stuff. I had a professor, Professor Collins. I had Professor Hopkins.
Professor
That's where I got
Collins,
those
do you-
from. I
what-
mean,
I
I
don't
mean,
want you
I
to
don't
dox
have it
yourself,
from
but
like
do you want
I
to tell
don't
me
have
the
it
university
from.
just so I can find them?
What's up?
Do you want to tell me the university
Oh,
name
this
so I
was
can
like
find this Professor
this was
Collins?
like 15 years ago over at
I'm sure
UOP.
you think that they're UOP? You said?
Mhm.
Oh, at University of Phoenix. Vance
No,
Collins.
we're talking Stockton, baby.
Oh, University of
Wait, you-
Pacific.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, I did debate
long
tournaments
time
there.
ago. Yeah, this is a long time ago, but no, like I said, it's like I
Alan
said,
Collins, Karen Collins.
I don't remember his first name.
Probably not Karen then. Unless, congrats, Karen, on the transition.
You guys are pretty progressive, huh?
But so all I'm saying is like, look, so I'm involved with cosmologists, at least, you know, as a matter of profession, if you will, and I'm familiar with the models that cosmologists put forward. Cosmologists are like the people who study like the origins of the universe. I'm familiar with the models that they put forward, and none of them are ever there was nothing in the beginning. They're never that way. Sometimes it's like they were in a quantum vacuum state, but that's not even nothing. That's just the lowest energy state. Sometimes they'll be like, there were no particles, but there were energetic fields. Like, there's always something in every single model I've ever seen. So I think you might just be mistaken that this is like an accurate representation of space. It's just not.
Huh.
And also, I mean, okay, like this is just not an indict of our view, right? If we hold to this, then some critique of like some other view is just not a critique of our view.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I mean, I got the cattiness for views and everything like that. But no, I appreciate the discussion and everything so far. I just, at the end of the day, I feel like too much of it. I mean, this is all my personal opinion, but just if you look around yourself, if you look around nature, because here's the thing is, evidence of divinity can be found in music. That's why all religions use music to praise whoever they worship. If you look around in nature, you can sense it. That's why when we go hiking or we go out in nature, we feel so much better. Now, let's look, for example, you look at vegetation, right?
How do you get God from any of that?
But this is not based off nothing. I just want to get this out before I get off this line and everything. But it's like, you look at fruits, you look at vegetation, right? Things like watermelon and cantaloupe that quenches our thirst. It grows in summertime when we need it. You look at fruits and stuff like oranges and things that are high in vitamin C. They grow in wintertime when we need it to fight getting infections and colds and stuff like that.
Why would God create all these berries that look identical to other berries but are poisonous and kill us instantly?
I can't explain that. What things grow their certain ways based on their ecosystem. That's all stuff that's based on our Earth at that point.
It's just highly unexpected that God would put us into this like Hunger Games like scenario where we have to figure out like we might all die if you eat like the wrong berries. Like it's just highly unexpected, right? I look at the trees and some of them are poisonous.
Well, think about this. For example, the fruits and vegetables that are good for certain parts of your body look like those parts of the body. There's
not true.
Wait, hold on. Just to be clear, are you telling me that the banana is good for? Well, never mind.
Bananas are good for bones. Bananas are good for bones. Bananas are good for bones. Walnuts are good for your brain. They look like brain. You look like mushrooms. Mushrooms are good.
Banana is good for the bone.
Yeah, but I'm telling. Right. But I'm telling you, if you look at certain vegetables, you look at sweet potatoes, they look like a pancreas. You look at a mushroom, you cut it sideways, it looks like an ear. You look at a carrot, it's good for your eyes. It looks like an eyeball. When you cut it, it has an iris and everything. What I'm saying is there's too much like oxygen, right?
Are we gonna let this guy get away with saying that carrots look like eyes?
Wait, carrots look like eyes?
It's crazy work.
Carrots look like another organ.
No, it isn't crazy work.
Also, actually,
it's crazy work.
Hold on, one sec. Scott, you know that carrots aren't actually good for your eyes, right? That was World War II propaganda pushed by the British. It's not real. It was made up.
Sure.
It's actually an interesting story.
No, I know it is, right?
People still believe it is wild.
Yeah.
Wait, do you think
Scott,
if I
say
brought
this
you
is your field of study? Sorry.
No, I'm just what I'm saying is this. There's a lot of evidence of it.
But no, Scott, I think just a second ago you said this was your field of study. Did I hear you correctly?
As far as like, I work pathology with animals. So what I'm saying is I see.
So not like a botanist or anything like that.
No.
Not a plantologist either. For those
at the same time, though,
you know.
Huh?
Nothing. Sorry, I wasn't taking a jab at you. I was taking a jab at somebody from a month ago.
I didn't even hear you, brother.
Oh,
you're good.
Sorry.
Don't worry about it.
I apologize. TikTok Live Studio sure is something.
How long you guys been doing this for?
Like debating or like?
This show has been around for about 6 months now.
Yep.
And I just want to call because I not to talk crud on a lot of other callers, but it's like a lot of people calling. They're just like, God, I'm like, oh my God, can somebody bring about at least something, something somewhat? I don't know, but I just, I don't know. At the end of the day, we'll find out when we close our eyes for good, right? That's kind of,
or we won't.
I mean, for me, who knows? Who knows? Because I don't know. It sounds goofy, but like, I kind of get solace that I don't know. Like I don't fear death at all. Because of that. I like mysteries. I like surprise. I want to find out what's at the end. So, I mean, we'll all find out, or we'll just continue on. I don't know. Who knows? We jump into we reincarnate. I don't know.
Yep. Do you have anything else?
What's up, man?
You have anything else?
I think that's all I got right now, you guys.
Yep. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks for being here, bud.
All right. David, you're up, David. Come on, David. Let's go, David. How's it going, David?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How old are you?
What you think? Terrible ages, man.
I don't know.
I'm about to be 30, actually.
Okay. Damn.
Is he really laggy, or is it just me?
It's kind of laggy.
My internet's kind of bad, so.
You might want to turn your camera off. It might make it better.
Also, is my mic quiet? People are saying
I
my
want
mic's
to see my.
quiet.
Let's see if that helps.
Sure.
Hope
so
that's better.
what religion are you, David?
Well, I would say I'm a Christian. I believe in the King James Bible. It's actually not a religion though. Today, religion is dealing with like systems, ordinances you have to perform, and I'm sure you're very familiar with the Bible. As far as some people believe, you're under the law. Some people believe you're not under the law. I actually just do whatever I want. The Bible talks about that you get the person of God, and the person of God, or any person, you just if you want to fulfill your will, you just do what you want. And I just happen to want to do the person of God, so that's why I wouldn't be classified as a religion.
So you're a KJV guy, right? That's what you said?
Yeah.
So would you say that God can do evil?
It says that he creates evil, and that's just when you have to get into definitions. So evil, from my understanding, just looking at the words and context is used, because sometimes in the Bible it just blatantly gives you definitions, which is great. Should definitely record it. Like God is a spirit. Even if you don't know what God is or spirit is, it's giving you a model. It's giving you definition, so you can start to build from it. From my understanding, good and evil is dealing with ill will to individuals.
So God created evil, right? Whatever the definition, you agree that God created evil, yeah?
Well, in that context, I would say that it just has to be further defined. But I get what you're saying.
And in 1 Timothy 4:4, it says that everything that God created was good. Do you agree with that?
I believe so, yeah. Because the point
God,
though,
so everything that God created is good, but also God created evil. Are you telling me that evil was good?
No. So I'm about to expound a little.
So who's wrong? Is it the Old Testament or is it 1 Timothy?
Neither are wrong, because if you want to find contradictions, you can do stuff like that. But there is a thing called scenarios and contexts. If you want a contradiction, obviously in the Proverbs it talks about to not speak unto a fool, but then also to speak as a fool and stuff like that.
That's actually classically not a contradiction. That's what the Proverbs is doing there is making a joke.
No, it's not a joke. I know it's not a contradiction. What I'm saying is, if you want to look for it, it may be a contradiction, or it may be just simply in context they're different.
The Bible has real contradictions.
Well, yeah, no, I've heard that a lot, and I don't know. I don't have all the answers, of course. I'm just saying that the stuff that I've studied seems to be pretty impressive. People say that there are contradictions in the fields that I've studied a lot, and it seems to be that they're reconcilable. Like, for example, this one that is giving.
I just brought up one. That is a genuine contradiction.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Justin?
The one you brought up?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, for that example is obviously in the Bible it mentions that interpreted as Lucifer, I believe it's Satan. He himself is attributed of corrupting his own wisdom. He basically looked at himself, thought he was wanted to be godlike. He made the I will statements. We can go to it.
He's about to turn to Ezekiel 28 or Isaiah 14. It'd be a fun ride.
Yeah,
it's funny because originally I was actually referring to Exodus 32:14 because I asked if God can do evil, not if God created evil. But you gave me the contradiction for me. But go ahead. Go ahead and look through Ezekiel.
So what I would say is as Jesus mentions in John 8 that apparently there was corruption that came about, and the father and originator of it, of course, in the Bible, John chapter 8, would be in Ezekiel chapter 28.
Well, in John
That
8:44,
Satan himself,
it says that
yeah, you know,
Satan was a liar and a murderer from the beginning, which means he wasn't good and then became corrupted.
well, he talks about that he's the father of it, though, which again has its
Yeah,
own
but
word,
John
terminology, and definition.
8:44 says he was a
Wait,
liar
I'm
and a
sorry.
murderer from the beginning.
Is father an ambiguous word now?
What do you
Do
mean
we
by
need
that?
context
These
for what the
woke
word
fucking
father
Yeah,
means?
yeah, every
What, are
word.
you telling me women
in-
can be fathers now?
No, what I'm saying is words have meanings
Cancelled.
in the Bible, and father, if you look into it, they're using words and definitions that seem to be consistent and have actual definitions and processes to it. For example, when it mentions that God rested on the seventh day, people say, well, doesn't he have unlimited power? What's going on? Why is he resting? Well, rest is just dealing with a cease of process. If you rest, the process is stopping. Something's stopping. So it is true that you can, rest as far as rejuvenating health, but the Bible uses these terms. It uses them because it has to communicate. It's communicating rather sophisticated things, and why not just use terms and definitions that are already consistent with reality and with how the text
It could
uses
just
it.
say
So when
things
it
that are
uses
not
the father
contradictory,
of
though.
it,
Like you don't have to create contradictions in order to say things that are not complicated.
well, what I'm saying is when it mentions that in the text, Jesus himself says that Satan is the father of it.
Right, but
You can interpret it whatever you
nobody
think it
cares.
means, but
Listen, the father terminology is useless here. No one cares about the meaning of the word father. We're talking about Satan, whether or not he was a liar and a murderer from the beginning, or if he was a good guy that turned bad. Which one is it?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is this reasoning, which I think is a universal principle. Like, did God create evil? Did God create Satan to be evil? No, the Bible says no. That there
Well, but
is.
David, I think you're
it
having a hard
will
time following the
involved.
conversation.
Yeah, you go.
The Bible does say God created evil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flat out, it does
So
say
when
that.
it says, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is when it says that, instead of just saying, well, it contradicts and throws it out, maybe you can actually look into it and see if there's any other avenues that could be meaning. Because it does mention that God punishes people, and that will be a form of creating evil. If somebody
I'm
does
sorry.
ill will to somebody,
Ian, didn't we have
yeah,
this conversation yesterday?
With
I don't remember
yeah,
who.
yeah, no,
but
we did have this
exactly
conversation.
this
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. Of course we did. Yeah.
So look, are you telling me that it is evil to give someone justice?
no, what I'm saying is evil, if this is true, which is an if claim,
I'm
I
sorry, that
believe it
wasn't
to be
yesterday. That was
true.
this morning. I guess
If
yesterday. Anyway.
if the definition of evil is causing ill will to somebody, that will be literally the definition of a punishment. So it would fulfill
Is that the
it would be
definition of
fine.
evil?
That's what I'm
Is
trying to
that the
say.
definition of evil?
From
Because I
my
don't think that's the
understanding, yeah,
definition of evil.
yeah.
That's not the definition of evil.
From
Should we
my
just go
end,
look
well,
up
what
what
I'm trying
evil
to say
means?
is, well, you can look it up, but what I'm trying to say is that not all definitions are given in dictionaries and stuff. You actually have to look
Right.
Oh,
into
you
it.
have to
So
use
you're
your
just
own
making your own
definitions.
definition. Yeah. As long as you use my invented definition, then it's not a problem.
Well, I mean, it's just that's when you actually test it out because it mentions evil pretty good amount of times in the book. And to claim that this is a definition for evil, you can give a definition if
Well,
you
the
want.
definition's
We'll
actually
just see if it.
quite
Well,
simple.
no,
In the
what I'm
Hebrew
saying is
language,
if
the word
you.
ra for evil just
Uh,
means badness. It's the opposite of goodness, right? So when something is ra, it's evil, it's bad, it's
and
undesirable.
what does that mean?
When
Ill
when
will.
you
Yeah.
receive
So it's
when
ill
you
will.
that's not ill will.
Desire,
So ill
desire is
will is
synonymous with
only
will, ill
a
will.
single component of something that could be evil. For example, natural disasters are also described as ra, as being bad, right? So the idea
Why are they bad though?
the idea of evil in the Bible is
No, no.
just
Again,
the
I'm
thing
just
that is
saying
actually
stay on
not
topic.
good. So if somebody's receiving justice, that is a good thing, which means it is not bad.
Yeah, it's good to God because that's what He wills. To the
No,
person
it's
itself, it'll be ill
objectively
will. Yeah,
good in
that's
your
the point.
worldview for people to receive justice,
Yeah, and that again,
which means
uh,
you can't conflate somebody's punishment with evil, because the punishment that they're receiving is definitionally good because it's justice.
well, what I would say is, could you forgive them and not punish them?
Yeah, but the problem
So
is
then that would be. So
your
then that
God
would
could
be.
have done that and he
No,
didn't. So if you think it's
well, no.
better to
Listen,
forgive than punish, then you've just basically said that your God should have
no,
forgiven
no. What I'm saying
humanity
is,
rather than endlessly punishing them for
what
minor
I'm no,
infractions.
what I'm saying is, if somebody were to do that, let's say forgive them and not punish them, they themselves would create to the other person, because due to just power, of course, their ability to inflict this will, they would create good. That person would have good happen to them.
I
If
mean,
they happen to
I
be punished
agree. I
by an
think
individual,
forgiving
they
people is
themselves would
good.
be creating evil, and that's the purpose of it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
then
but I
your
think
God
punishing
does
at times is
evil
good
when he
also. So
punishes people.
that's the point.
So you've just created a definition that
Yeah,
requires
yeah,
your
that's
God to be
yeah.
evil. So you just said your God is evil when he punishes
Well, no,
people.
it's not. It's not being evil. There's a difference
That's what you
between
said.
being
You literally
evil
just
and
invented
creating
that
evil.
definition.
I did not say being evil. Being evil is the definition of Satan and his doctrine, which
Being
is
evil
why I went to John chapter
is
8.
doing
He's
evil.
the
So when you
father of
do
evil,
evil,
doing ill
you
will.
are in the state of being evil.
No, no, you don't
Well, yeah,
understand. Is
words have meanings. Yes, when you're doing
so
something evil, you are acting evil. You are evil.
that's just not
You
correct. Yeah, it's,
you
we
can't
can go a
be
little bit more
you
into it, but
can't
I
be
get what
all
you're saying. But
good.
I'm just saying there's a
David,
difference between
David,
the father
David,
of something, God being
David,
the father of good, the devil
David,
being the
can you
father
hear
of
me
evil.
talking, David?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think you'll okay. So let's have an actual conversation. Let's stop you talking over everybody. So can you be all good while doing evil?
Yeah. Well,
Then you're
not
not.
doing, but
No,
creating
definitionally,
evil as far as
David.
situation.
David, no, you can't. You can't be all good while doing evil.
Well, that's a substance. You understand? So, look, let me just explain. All right, if you want to talk, you can talk. Then. But
David,
you don't
David,
understand the substances of
David
what these
is
things are.
David is definitionally true. If you're all good, if everything you do is good, then it means you can't do evil. Evil is the opposite of good.
Hey, look,
Uh,
y'all.
that,
It's a fruit.
no, you can go.
Look how perfectly the banana fits into the hand.
Yeah, the atheist's worst nightmare, the banana. I'm trembling right now. All right, so David, listen, this is a useless conversation. Let's get back to the actual talking point. What was the actual talking point before you started making up definitions? Does anybody even remember what the talking
Well,
point was?
what did I make up?
Does
You,
anyone know what the actual talking point was, or did you not have one
we don't
yet,
want to say.
David?
Well, we just kind of jumped into it as far as
He
it.
didn't bring up a talking point. I pushed him on the God creates evil and also God creates good from the very beginning. So that's my
Right,
fault.
yeah, which is a contradiction. But fair enough. So David, let's reframe the conversation. So you believe in some version of a God that you think is found in the King James Bible. What would be the argument or the evidence why anyone else would believe in this thing?
Oh, well, I mean, just like anything else, when you can't yourself see it, like a court case or something, you just get the evidences. If you can find consistency and use the scientific method, if you can find statistical impressive consistency, you
Yep.
can, I do
But
believe,
how's that end on God?
beyond reasonable doubt. Well,
How does that
all I'm
end with a
saying is
God?
the Bible, like other books, presents evidences and information where you can obviously
But it
work with and see if
fails.
it's consistency.
Like if you read
Well,
it,
I'm just
it
saying from my
fails all the
studies,
time.
it does
As
it.
we've already, it does. It can't get history
Well,
right. Doesn't get biology right. It fails. It fails its own predictions.
well, I'll just say from what y'all were just talking about, because I'm obviously not a biologist and really nothing, just a carpenter.
We grant
What I would
that.
say is that when
Like the good shepherd.
like y'all are talking about a lot of metaphysical stuff as far as time, the beginning, and said what y'all speaking about, substance. What y'all speaking about is a kind of a lot. I think it's appealing to a lot like the kind of the Trinitarians talk about. I'm not Trinitarian, but it's a lot of mystery claims where I'm sure
What's
everybody
happening right
here.
now? We're trying to have a
I'm giving.
discussion. Why are you
No,
talking
I'm
about the meta conversation right now? No, listen, no one cares
well.
what you
That
think about the conversation. We're trying to have a conversation about why we should
no,
believe in
I'm
the same
bringing up
God
a
you believe
topic.
in.
No, I'm yeah,
David,
I'm
we
bringing up a
already
specific.
focused, David. We have a topic. The topic started with the question, why would I
Yeah, I am.
believe in your
You
God?
gotta
And you
just be a
said that
little
because the
patient.
Bible presents evidence, right? So I said, well, the Bible doesn't present good evidence because it contradicts itself. It gets history wrong. It gets biology wrong, and it fails its own predictions. That's why I don't believe that the Bible is
Yeah,
good
and
evidence.
I let you speak for a couple minutes. I let you at least 40
No,
seconds.
no,
I'm trying to speak
it
for
was
about 40
literally
seconds.
15
The
seconds.
whole
And
yeah,
what I'd love for you to do is actually address the words that came out of my mouth.
and I did. I said I don't know anything about biology and history. That's why I'm not convinced. I'm telling you what I
Great.
have studied
So
and the knowledge
then
I
would you
have.
like to see
So I
where it
can
gets
present
biology,
information.
history, and everything else wrong? We'd like to see that.
I can't present it. I'm not an expert
I
at it. I
can.
don't have the
I
reading.
asked you, would you like to see it? I can present
I
it.
know, but you're asking me of what information do I have that I
No,
could
I
present
am not,
that's
David. I am
convincing.
not asking
If
you
you're not
whether or
doing
not you
that,
can present
then
biology. David, just focus. I asked you a question. Would you like me to show you my claim that the Bible gets these things wrong?
uh, I rather explain what I'm saying
No, he would not. He
because
would
I
not.
believe
That makes
Well,
perfect sense.
okay.
principally I'm
We either need you to
familiar.
be okay with Justin explaining these things, or we need you to make a point that indicates that God is real. We need one or the other.
Yeah. So what you're describing earlier, as far as this box is concerned, I believe the astronomer, somebody that was talking about, they're associating with astronomy. They made an analogy and a comparison, which I happen to believe is just three, which I do think is, again, like if I had about 40 seconds
Buddy,
Is he
I don't
keeping up for
talk,
think
y'all?
how the
if you had
Trinitarians
40
think the
minutes, you
Trinity
couldn't
is
make a
just a
coherent
logical
point.
contradiction.
Oh no. Oh no. It's getting too laggy. Oh no. We have to move on to the next one. Oh no.
Oh,
We do have super
darn.
chats, by the way.
Yeah. Let's read some super chats. Who's the last one?
Was it?
Oh yeah. Dion, thank you so much for the $2. Christ is lie. Oh yeah, I read that one. Adele, thanks so much for the $5. Happy Sin Day to my favorite trio. Happy Sin Day to you too, Adele. Space Lord of 75, thank you so much for the $2. Oh, Tangelo is a snowflake. That snowflake is wrong. I agree. He got incinerated. Flash, thank you so much for the $10. Yeah, my 92 dream team is back. Nice to see the three of you together. Nice to see you, Flash. Rahul,
Yeah,
thanks so
Flash.
much for the $6.66 Canadian dollars.
Canadian.
The Canuck bucks. For Hail the Unholy Trinity. I appreciate it.
Should we move on to Josh?
Yeah, I think we shall. Josh, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Doing well. How old are you?
Hey, okay.
Great. Well, you guys asked excellent questions. I was just scrolling through on YouTube and saw you guys. I don't know much about you. I am a believer. I don't know if you guys wanted to ask me questions or.
Sure. What do you believe in?
Good question. I'm trying to figure out how to answer this without you guys tearing me apart because you guys are pretty good. I would just say I'm a
to be
Christian.
clear,
Christian.
yeah, okay, great. That's it. It just provides grounding.
No, yeah.
The best question to start the conversation, if you don't know where you want to start, is what would you say is your best explanation or best reason that you think justifies or proves the existence of the Christian God?
this may sound ridiculous, but I think the experiential factor is very important. Obviously, it's subjective, and you can't really prove it objectively in the court of law or with logic
Even on a
per se. I think
YouTube
you
live
could.
stream.
Huh?
You can't even prove it on a YouTube live stream, right? So
Well,
I
we
should
don't have to go
rephrase.
there. We can go with what you guys were talking about before with the problem of evil, which I think is an excellent question, probably one of the best questions
Yeah,
regarding
go for it.
the existence of God. So,
Wait, you think that proves the existence of God?
no, regarding the existence of
Sure,
God.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. To me, I think I guess there's like lots of different approaches, but I think the data related to like natural evils are really weird. It's unexpected that we would live in a world that has earthquakes and the sun gives us cancer, and filled with natural disasters, filled with diseases, filled with like tons of animal suffering, human suffering, that isn't caused by other humans. I think that this is really hard to explain if you think that God created the world and that he's all good.
Well, and you probably can guess where I'm going to go here, but I would say, but that would be explained by the introduction of sin into the world.
But how would you explain the fact that all these things existed before humans existed, right? Like we have dinosaur bones that have cancer on them. We have like a mosquito in amber from 20 million years ago. It's millions of years before humans existed. You know, we have evidence from earthquakes from millions of years ago. It's believed that Pangea was split apart by earthquakes. You know, it just doesn't seem like any of that is going to be able to account for the data. In fact, it just seems like all of the scientific evidence would just be like directly against that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm not stating these things with certainty regarding evil. I think there is something to be said about we don't know exactly how long ago the Garden of Eden occurred. What exactly? Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I agree with you on this. I don't think there's an excellent answer there. So that's why I wanted to kind of jump straight into the deep end and have you guys drown me.
Yeah,
I hope you brought your floaties.
yeah. Well, I think that's a great
I
mindset.
can hold my breath.
Yeah. So I guess I think the problem for me is that you can say that we don't know how long ago the Garden of Eden was, but presumably it just would have been at the time of the first humans, and the first humans are from like 300,000 years ago.
Yeah, although again, there are different interpretations in Genesis where it could be that there were already humans before Adam and Eve were created because he created the Garden of Eden and placed it on Earth. So there's a couple different interpretations there, but let's go with what you were saying. Okay, so the Garden of Eden started 300,000 years ago, but you're saying because there are dinosaurs with cancer in them or whatever,
Yeah.
before that, there was evil in the world before that.
Yeah, that all these like structural factors of our environment, the fact that DNA mutates and can cause cancer, the fact that the sun specifically causes mutations, you know, the fact that malaria exists, all those things, all these things existed like far before.
That could very well be true. I guess it doesn't, for me, it wouldn't. Again, I'm going to sound like an uneducated person here, but I just don't know if I believe for a fact that those things have been proven.
You don't believe in dinosaurs?
I believe, well, let's think here. Do I believe in dinosaurs? Do I believe that the evidence presented to me is infallible and that I should believe in dinosaurs? Yeah, I guess so. If that makes sense, like, okay, I believe in dinosaurs. That now leads me to not believe in God. So I guess I don't believe in dinosaurs. That type of reasoning for me. And again, I realize at this point I'm just lost in the quicksand. You're doing a very good job of
I'll
explaining
give
this.
you advice. You seem like a nice guy, so I'll give you advice. You don't want to run the Adam and Eve story. There's like a couple of reasons why it fails. One, on face, it's just obviously unjustifiable, right? Like generational punishment is just crazy. Like that's just an insane thing. But two, it's
Why?
like all the evidence is against it. There's like not a single piece of evidence that will support it. All of these evils existed beforehand. It's just not a winning move. I think that there's like lots of great theodicies, or not great. I think all of them fail, but I think that there's like better ones than the Adam and Eve story that you could go with.
So I've heard a version of the Adam and Eve story where somebody says, well, Adam and Eve was like a spiritual Adam and Eve, or the Garden of Eden was like a spiritual garden where like the souls of Adam and Eve were there at the creation of the universe. And then you can make that argument. Then you can say, well, yes, but by the Garden of Eden, we don't mean a literal garden. We mean like a garden in heaven that Adam and Eve were in, and their souls existed before they existed, and that's where all of this took place. But then you run into some other issues, like why the hell are there trees in heaven? Like, why is a snake in heaven, right?
Also,
How
for
did
the
they get
evidential
kicked out
problem
and
of
then end up on
evil, the
Earth?
question for that just becomes like, well, what's the evidence, right? Like, what's the evidence that any of that happened? And of course, it's just going to be it's going to be dependent on the evidence for the Bible.
Well, yeah, so I don't agree with that symbolic representation. I think as a Christian, I've placed myself under the yoke of believing that the Bible is true. And there are certain contradictions in it, in which you guys are doing a great job, or at least seeming contradictions, which may or may not be able to be resolved by me personally, and certainly not, nor by you guys. But can I ask you guys a different question, or do you want to stay on this?
Sure, yeah, you can ask us a different
Sure, go
question, I
ahead.
guess, yeah.
So I don't know much about all three of you, but were any of you at one point Christians, or have you always been?
I was born Christian.
Would you say? What's that? Sorry.
Those two were.
I was born Christian.
Okay. What denomination?
I was evangelical.
And then was there a specific point, or was it like a preponderance of evidence, or how did you?
Yeah, it was just a logical argument. One of my friends presented me with a logical argument when I was like 13, and I was like, oh, damn, I guess God isn't real.
What was the specific argument? In that case?
Yeah, can God make a rock that's so heavy he can't lift it?
Okay,
That's
so
such
yeah,
an
similar to
embarrassing
like,
origin story, Ian.
Yeah, I know it is, yeah.
so somewhat similar to God. Can God create? Well, not exactly similar, but somewhat similar to can God create evil, like you guys were talking about earlier, or did God create evil? An opposite.
Because I don't know if I'd say that these are the same, because I think that
Similar.
it's a stress. So the rock is a stress test of God being all powerful.
Right.
Well, but so is God creating evil, right? Because
what I'm saying, yeah.
or rather, it's
Right.
Like it's a similar idea.
It's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
omni problem.
Can I? So going back to that one with the evil, again, this how I perceive it. Again, this may not be a good argument, but I would perceive it as God created beings with the choice of whether to follow him or not, and some didn't follow him, and that led to rebellion, which led to, however you defined evil earlier, I guess. What was it? Opposite of good?
So that just doesn't make sense for like natural evils. So I don't think that justifies moral evils
Mhm.
either, but it like super doesn't justify natural evils.
Why?
Because presumably these natural evils arose from just the way that God created the planet. That these are just features that God added to it. Like God made the sun such that it emits rays that cause mutations. God made our DNA in such a way that they get mutations, one of which is cancer. You know, there's certain animals that basically don't get cancer ever. Naked mole rats basically don't get cancer ever. That's just
Same
the way
with
their cells are
elephants.
built. But we do. We have the cancer cells. They have the no cancer cells. God could have given us the no cancer cells. Instead, God gave us the cancer cells.
Yeah, although again, I would say that it was when we were originally created, we at least either had protection from cancer cells or didn't have the cancer cells, and then with the introduction of sin or death into the world, we now became susceptible to our own mortality.
No, we're aware of that. The
Yeah.
problem is that it's not necessary. Like it's not. God wasn't required to create the world with this type of suffering after the fall. That was just a decision that he made.
Like in
Well,
fact,
so-
he says what the punishment is, right? He says, Eve, you ate from the apple, so we're going to make childbirth more painful for you and all of your descendants. And snake, you were deceptive. Now you have to crawl upon on your belly. So like those are the punishments that God laid out, and then we kind of just infer that the rest are intentional punishments. But like read properly, like it's just the punishment is that eventually you'll die, childbirth will be painful, and snakes get to crawl in their stomach. It doesn't say anything about earthquakes. So you kind of just have to infer it from the Bible. But we know that earthquakes have been around for far longer than humans have.
Yeah, again, I'm willing to grant that point. I guess it doesn't, for me, provide like an argument against this particular case. Okay, so let's go back to what you said with the curse of God for Eve, and then for Adam, and then for the serpent. Or no, it was for Adam, Eve, and then the serpent after. To me, that just seems like a logical outcome of eating the fruit from the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat the fruit from the knowledge of with the knowledge of good and evil, you now have this new thing which is inside of you, which then leads to these things. And God particularly claim that here's what exactly will happen because of what you've done. I guess it was a punishment, but it also was just like a logical outcome of their initial decision.
So, sorry, how does that follow? So they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, so they had knowledge like God, or at least something like God. That's what it
You
says.
shall become like gods, yeah.
But how does it follow then that having that knowledge means that you shall surely die? Because God has that knowledge, and God doesn't die.
Yeah, it's a great point. So again, I would say that because of how we were created or who we are, he placed that limit on us in order that we could have some kind of grace at some point.
But he didn't have to place that limit on us.
No, he didn't have. No,
That was a
he didn't
choice.
have to. What do you mean?
make
Oh,
us
he had a
suffer.
choice. So you're saying why
Yeah,
did he do that?
Yeah, he could have made it so then we could have all that knowledge without dying.
That's true, but again, for whatever reason, I'm not saying I know what God thinks, but for whatever reason, he said not to eat that fruit, and then we did, and then there was a consequence from that. Now, he could have certainly not had a consequence from that. I agree with that. But yeah,
I think that's the point we're making, is that everything that happened after the fall, it wasn't like this was the inevitable consequence, like this is how things work. No, these are like decisions that God made, right? Just so, for example, if my child went to school and punched another kid in the nose, there's going to be a consequence of that, right? But if he comes home and I said, listen, you punched this kid in the nose, now I have to punch you in the nose. Well, that's not an unintended
Now I have
consequence.
to punch your son in the nose.
That's me making a decision to repay evil with evil. You see what I'm saying? So, like, what happens after the people misbehave as a punishment, you have control over that. You get to control those parameters. And if I decide to punch my son in the nose, I'm now evil.
Well, okay, but if again, this might sound silly, but if you had made the parameters beforehand that you will punch your son in the nose if he punches someone else,
But he didn't. He didn't tell
didn't
Adam
say
and
it.
Eve that you'll die.
Also,
He didn't
even if
say
he
it.
did, right? Like that's
Yeah.
still crazy.
Even
Well,
if he
of course,
did, it's
that's
still
crazy.
horrific.
Well, this particular point with punching your son in the nose, I think, is horrific. I agree with that.
Let's put it more in context. So
Okay.
my kid goes to school. I don't have a kid, but suppose I have a kid. My kid goes to school, punches a kid in the nose. When he comes home, I punch him in the nose, and then I promise him, when you have a kid, I'm gonna punch that kid in the nose, and then when that kid has a kid, I'm also gonna punch that kid in the nose. Like, what? What are we doing here?
But okay, you could say that direct one is silly. I agree with that. That would be silly. But I think it's more of like, if your kid punches another kid in the nose and then continues to do that, there will be consequences from
Wait,
that.
no, but it only happened once, right?
What
Eve
only
ate
happened
the
once?
apple, and that was it. That was the whole thing. And
But
then
then
God's
people
like, yeah,
continued-
all of your children's children will suffer.
Well, but then people continued engaging in that activity. Not particularly.
Not yet. Not until God had already cast them out, had already cursed them with the curse of death, right? That happened
Well, okay.
the moment they ate the fruit, not like after.
Yeah, there was now a new set of conditions of existence.
Right. Which were not necessary. This is just a decision that God made.
Okay,
And
well,
evil.
I'll even agree with that. But what's the point of that? Like, I agree with. Like, okay, I'll agree with that.
Well, it's punishing the son for the sins of the father is generally regarded as not just.
Right.
In
Yeah.
this case, it's the
Like
daughter
generational
for the
curses
sins
you're
of the mother.
talking about. You brought the other guy.
Yeah.
What's the other guy's name? He brought that up earlier.
Yeah, and I
Generational.
could like give like a syllogism for that. I take justice like by definition to be people getting what they deserve. Your children didn't do anything to deserve being punished. Like getting born to you is not an action deserving of punishment.
Well, okay. Again, I with my response, I'm not trying to like change the point here, but I guess if the children didn't sin, they would not be punished. But they do sin. Everyone sins after
Well,
Adam and Eve.
it doesn't
with a
matter,
couple
though.
exceptions. Some people
It
don't
doesn't.
sin.
It doesn't matter because, for
Hold on.
example,
Question.
even
Yeah.
if
Sorry.
go ahead, let's.
Was childbirth painful for Mary?
Yeah.
But she had the Immaculate Conception. She didn't have original sin. So why was childbirth painful for her?
Well, but that's a Catholic teaching. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that.
Well,
That she didn't have sin in her?
I'm
You disagreed.
pretty sure that you have to believe that if you want Jesus to not have to like not be
That Eve
to like
was
not to be
sinless, or no?
sin free or
So
something like that.
That Mary was sinless.
Yeah, I think so. I think that
No.
that's like not just Catholic.
As far as I'm aware, it's pretty much. I could be wrong, but at least I don't see that as the case. But I could be wrong.
That's interesting. Wait, Justin, what were you asking?
So what I was saying is that, like, even if, because this is what Ian brought up earlier, even if they were warned ahead of time, here's some shit that's going to happen, right? It still doesn't make it justified. Like, if I said, listen, Ian, when you have children, if your child acts up, I'm going to lock up your children and your children's children, and then your great grandchildren, and everybody after that, right? Like, it doesn't matter that, like, they knew there was a threat ahead of time. Like, if the punishment is like undeserving, it's undeserving, and it's never okay to punish people for crimes they never committed.
Yeah, again, I'm not trying to like have a circular argument here, but I just the children did commit sin.
Okay, let's
So
take
what?
let's say you get
What
birthed.
sin did the children commit?
Let's say you get birthed and immediately
Well,
you die in an
Cain, I mean, he's the
earthquake
first
under
one to
like
come
some
along.
rubble. What sin did you commit, like by getting birthed and then dying in an earthquake? Like, how did you deserve that?
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, again, this is an excellent point too. Like, I agree. Like, this is where a new set of questions and problems and come into play. It is again to do with, in my opinion, is to do with the overall introduction of sin into the world. Like, there's going to be now chaos. Chaos has now been introduced.
Does it need to be? You keep talking about it as though it's just an unintended consequence. Golly gee, nobody could do anything about it. But that doesn't have to be that way. God controls all those parameters. So the baby that is killed in the earthquake or the hurricane or whatever natural disaster, who has never sinned in its life, that's an innocent, unnecessary death and punishment for crimes that were never committed.
Yeah, I mean, this again ties in very well to Brothers Karamazov with the Ivan argument here, where he says, and he goes even further than that, right? Where he says a child who was tortured by his parents and left out inside an outhouse in the freezing cold and was tortured to death, and then I'm going to reject God because that very thing that could exist, even if the child is now taken immediately to heaven and given all of the pleasures in the world, the fact that that happened in the first place is unjust and should not and should
I
be an
agree.
indictment of God. Yeah, so that's what I was just saying. Like, that's an even stronger version of that argument, and I think it's an excellent argument. I'm not claiming to have solved that, and it's also helpful to know that in that novel, Alyosha, who is his interlocutor, never directly responds to it, but simply
Right.
says that would be rebellion. And then through the rest of the novel, it's kind of borne out like who ends up living in more contentment or peace. Ivan ends up going insane. Alyosha, but again, no, I'm not. I don't have a direct answer for that. I agree. Like, that's probably in my opinion, the best argument. It is, in the end, I guess I'd go back to the fact that he created us with a choice, with free will. And some people are going to choose horrific things, and they're going to torture their children, and that is beyond belief, beyond conception. I don't know that I would reject God because of that, but it is.
But we're not holding God accountable for what humans do. We're holding God accountable for what God does.
Because he allowed this to happen.
No, because he causes it to happen.
Because he causes it to happen. What's the difference? Sorry?
Yeah. If God created the world in a way in which natural disasters wouldn't exist, and so therefore nobody would ever be killed in a tornado, right? No babies would ever be harmed in a falling building. These are decisions that God made. Like, he made that decision that the world was going to do that stuff. So he's responsible for it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess so. I just had a thought, which you guys will think I'm crazy, but I guess one possible out, which is probably a crazy out, would be that these conditions for tornadoes, for earthquakes, for hurricanes, the atmosphere itself, weather, you could say it's completely controlled by God with no other forces, but it could also be controlled by these other evil forces. Not controlled, but let's just say like they have access to this realm.
But God made the evil forces.
Yeah. Okay, so
you're kicking the can down the road.
There's also another philosophical
we go back to
problem there, by the way. It's called the problem of overdetermination. So if we can already account fully and sufficiently for why like tornadoes and earthquakes happen, right? Like, earthquakes happen because of tectonic plates. Like, if we can just explain all of it without appealing to demons, saying like, tectonic plates and then demons would just like overdetermine earthquakes. Like, it's irrelevant. Like, I don't know. The
Well, but
demons
you
are
don't know
causally
why the
irrelevant to the
tectonic plates
situation.
shift. Like, you know, like it's heat or it's pressure and they shift, but like what? But like why in this particular case at this particular point did they shift? I guess and you don't have to know why. I'm not even saying that's correct. I guess it's just like,
presumably
yeah.
there would just be like some sort of like natural explanation for why. Like that's like the dynamical system is going to have it that at this specific time they shift at this specific location. In fact, the data is exactly in line with that, right? There's like earthquakes that happen in the middle of the ocean, like teeny tiny earthquakes in the middle of the ocean that happen just based on like tectonic plates. So that seems much more likely.
Okay, but yeah, and then we go back. So then that would be God set those things in place from my side, I guess, would be the right.
Yep.
Okay, but then I would say there that he set those conditions in place. They can be manipulated. I know this is probably a crazy argument, so this is just a thought I had. So we don't necessarily have to go down this route, but that's like those conditions are set in place, just like a field is out there, and you can do whatever you want with the field, and then whoever comes along, they can do certain things. Now, okay, fine. I know I sound crazy, so we don't even have to go off that route there.
Yeah, I just think that at that point it just becomes like an evidential issue, right? Like we just, it's just not true, right? Like we know why these things happen. It's not demons.
Okay. We know what, again, we know why those things happen. Fine.
But do you have anything
else? I think it's a little, no. Did you guys have any other questions? Like any other tough questions that you'd like to just like bomb away before I leave?
There's a lot, but we should probably move on to the next guest because we do have a lot of guests waiting.
Yep.
No, you're good, Josh. You were a delightful human being, and keep on being you. Okay.
Yep.
Right, for sure. Come back anytime.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
We do have some super chats. We should probably go over those, and then we can move on to Hank.
Yep. Okay. We got Jerry, thank you so much for the $10. Would an omniscient God know the highest number? Is that similar to the Cantor's theorem and the set of all sets? No, that is a category error. There is no highest number. You can just reject the question on that basis.
Unless you're an ultra-finitist, in which case then there is one.
Wait, what does that even mean?
Ultra-finitists think that the only numbers that exist are the ones that can and have been constructed.
Oh, that's stupid. Okay.
It is stupid.
That's
but
really
they
dumb.
exist.
That's silly. Okay.
They don't think that real numbers exist. They think that only rational numbers exist and only those that have actually been constructed.
Okay.
It's very silly.
That's silly. So not I would say probably not. That to me sounds more like, I feel like you could use that. I actually don't think there's anything there. I don't even think that that's like similar to like, can God make a rock that's so heavy you can't lift it? I think that that's just like asking like, does God know like the fucking like 25th hour of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a category error.
Yep. Rock hard for Doug. Thanks so much for the $10. I hope Jurassic Park actually happens and this guy gets treated like the lawyer in the porta potty for his blasphemy. Praise Doug. Karen Stone and T-Rex. Terrence, thank you so much for the 5 Australian dollary dues. Don't forget to finger blast that like button. Oh, yeah. What body part does the apple from the garden look like? Thank you so much, Adele. We appreciate that. What body part does the apple from the garden look like?
The ovaries. Trick question.
Oh, that's why they had the painful childbirths.
Yeah. They're actually not good for the ovaries, it turns out.
Oh, shit.
All right. The next guest, I believe, is Hank. Hey, Hank. How's it going?
The next guest is indeed Hank.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know about the whole fruit looking like other organs thing. That was an interesting point. But I'm a Christian, so I just figured I'd call in and see if you guys have any questions or like what you.
What's going to be your strongest evidence or argument for God's existence or the truth of Christianity or anything in that regard?
Probably, I'd say like just reconciling consciousness with like an entropic universe. That so you have so much entropy and things dissipating, heat dissipation, things like that. I just don't know how you get consciousness out of such a disordered system.
Well, through
Just
evolution.
because the universe is headed towards disorder, assuming that it is, that doesn't mean that you can't have complexity in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying there. Like you're in that sweet spot for consciousness to exist, but I think the complexity is just too high for it to arrive from natural causes. And I have the same issue with evolution. Like, say for instance, like evolving an eyeball. I don't see how you jump from developing certain sensory cells to developing a complex eyeball, like from
Step
an
by
evolution.
step, right? I mean, like,
Well, no,
this is one of the most well-studied evolutionary.
You take away the rods and the cones, and you have a totally non-functioning eyeball. You take away.
So Hank,
I mean, people go blind from minor injuries to the back of
the evolution of the eye is one of the most well-studied evolutionary chains that we have, and in fact, because but because the eye is so ubiquitous, it's common in basically all things, basically all mammals, or sorry, all animals, and even, well, yeah, all animals. Because the eye is common in basically all animals, we can actually look at what the rudimentary eyes would look like, and they're basically just a cluster of cells sitting on top of the skin. No lens, no cornea, no vitreous fluid, no nothing. It's just a cluster of cells, and if you pass something over those cells, it sends a signal that says dark, and if you don't pass something over those cells, it sends a signal that says light. And then if that cluster of cells indents a little bit, now you can get directionality. Because now, if the light is coming from one direction, it'll hit one cell.
You have one organism born with that deformation or that issue, and then that organism outlives all the other children, and then it just happens. It just doesn't seem.
Yeah, well, that's how evolution works, right? Slight advantages over time accumulate.
It doesn't seem. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
So there's a lot of literature on this, particularly on the evolution of the eye. Like there are books written about it from biologists, from evolutionary biologists that you could probably go take a look at. I think even what's his face? Richard Dawkins even talks about this in one of his books. But that, he'll be an ideologue.
Look at simpler and more complex systems, but I don't think that more complex systems develop naturally from simpler systems. I think that they just exist independently.
How that can happen, though.
Yeah, well, no, you gave an example of how you're saying it could happen. I don't see natural processes producing that outcome is the issue. I understand how you could say, I understand the concept of survival of the fittest, evolution, even if people want to throw in epigenetics into that some people say, well, they know that they need that to survive. So their children are born with these things because of, conditions that affect genetics of the children. But even with that, I just don't see it as happening. And even more than that,
you agree that mutations happen, yeah?
Yeah. Oh yeah, mutations happen, correct.
And some of those mutations, maybe not many, but some of those mutations will be beneficial, right?
Oh yeah, probably.
So then why couldn't those beneficial mutations be passed down?
They are passed down.
So then what's the issue? Now you have evolution. Beneficial mutations that are passed down in a population, that's what mutation basically is. Sorry, that's what evolution basically is.
I think it's more of a semantics thing when you say you have evolution there. Because, yeah, of course you have evolution, but are you achieving consciousness through evolution is kind of my contention.
Well,
and I just don't...
The example I was talking about was the eyeball. I mean, like, clearly, if you have mutations...
We don't really understand consciousness, so it's kind of hard to say where it might develop from. So it's easier to say if you can't prove the production of any of these larger organ systems through evolution, then I don't see how you could. How do you then arrive at consciousness?
Fortunately, we can explain the evolution of the eye. Once you've accepted that mutations can happen, some of which can be beneficial, and that those mutations can be passed down, and that those mutations, because they're beneficial, can lead to increased survival rates, then you can go from just a single cluster of cells on the surface of the skin to an indent, to a cavity filled with a fluid, to a cavity filled with a fluid that the front of which is slightly hardened, to the cavity filled with a fluid with a lens, and then you end up with eyeballs.
And again, I understand the argument. Just to me, from a conceptual, when I conceptualize that, it doesn't seem accurate. And I don't think the numbers bear that out. I don't think there's enough time. I don't think there's enough stability on the planet, especially to have the diversity that we have.
Hank, why do you think biologists are unified on this idea of evolution?
Well, I think for one thing is because it's the only thing that would make sense outside of God. There
are theistic evolutionists in the field of biology. You know that, right?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Right. So I guess
and I'm
what I'm trying
totally
to figure out, Hank, is why is it
core.
that the people who know evolution and biology the best, why is it all these people kind of seem to agree on like these basic principles? It's only like the non-experts, the people who haven't studied biology, the people who haven't really studied the science that make these ideas that, well, it just can't be true, therefore God. But like, if that were the case, I would imagine that the actual experts would have found this out already.
Well, I think there's a limit to the amount of knowledge that humans can obtain, especially when you're talking about things. I mean, you really have radiocarbon dating and a few other
ice core samples.
Yeah, you have other radiological dating systems and other drillings. You can go look at whatever bacterial and the
Newtonian modeling. We have tons of stuff.
There are ways of doing it, but I think that there is. Then again, you don't know what was happening with the Earth as a whole and the system as a whole at that time. So I think that there's limits to the amount of knowledge that humans can obtain, and I think that there's a consensus on evolution, but I don't think that's kind of like an appeal to authority, in my opinion. Not that an evolutionary biologist wouldn't have more information on this or be able to argue their point better, but I think that there's a limit to the amount of knowledge you have, and I think it ends at consciousness and the development of consciousness.
I bring it up not because I'm making an appeal to authority. I'm bringing it up because like your argument so far is that you're giving an argument from incredulity. You just can't see how it can be possible. But the experts who study this have given you the explanations for how it is possible. And it sounds to me like you actually haven't read any of that literature. So what I would recommend is actually talking to somebody who is an expert in this field of study and finding out, why are all these biologists in lockstep? Why do they all agree on this issue of evolution?
Well, I would say, how do you then transfer that into consciousness?
I mean, you can ask a neurologist.
Well, I don't think neurologists really know consciousness. To be fair,
well, I'm not sure they all agree, but I also don't think that the idea of consciousness is like the nail in the coffin for evolution. I think consciousness might be something that we're still learning to explain. Like we're still figuring it out, but you can't just say, well, here's one thing that I don't know, we don't have a complete agreement on inside of the scientific field, therefore God. Like that's not how that argument works. Like in order to posit a God as being a necessary entity for these things, there needs to be some sort of a reason to believe that the God is the cause of it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and my reasoning for believing that God is the cause of it in the first place would be that I think consciousness is something that's incomprehensible because it exists outside of ourselves. It is it's kind of like what you said about the God with not being able to lift. Can he make a rock that's too heavy for him to lift? Well, no, because a rock exists inside of God. So God is outside the presence. I mean, it's not an internally consistent question to begin with. It's not.
So you believe that God is conscious?
Yeah. Well, consciousness exists inside God. Yes.
Okay, so what you're arguing is basically special pleading. Like, our form of existence couldn't have evolved consciousness, but God does have a consciousness. I don't know how he got it. He just has it because he's God, and I made up these properties. But why
Yeah,
is
I mean,
God?
God could have
Why is
derived from
God more
evolution.
likely an answer for consciousness than the consciousness granting unicorn?
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of like the spaghetti monster thing. It's like, okay,
It's-
that's a little
It's
silly.
exactly like the spaghetti monster thing.
It's the
Well,
same
yeah,
thing,
but
and the reason why
consciousness is the thing
we
that
use
is.
these
Well, hold
examples
on, let
is
me answer
because
the
they
question.
illustrate the point so well, right? The
Well, let me
point
answer the
is,
question.
if you're saying
No.
there's this unexplained phenomenon, like we don't have an explanation for it, if you're just going to make up an explanation for it, I can make up anything. I can say
No,
it
no, I'm
seems
not making up an explanation. I'm
much
saying that the
more
explanation is
parsimonious that there is a consciousness granting unicorn that grants consciousness, and there's a lot less assumptions in there.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot. Well, I don't even think there is an assumption there. I think that's kind of so. I think we all know it's not a unicorn.
Then
I
disprove
think
it.
the idea that there is a larger consciousness outside of us
No,
is not the famous
it
thing.
comes from the consciousness
maybe
granting unicorn.
maybe
It's
I could
No,
metaphysically
because I'm saying
necessary.
that
maybe
a
I could
unicorn
be
can be conceptualized. So what I'm saying is that God is that which cannot be conceptualized, and that which cannot be
Whether or not you
conceptualized.
can conceptualize is irrelevant. What I'm saying is that there's a
think it's
consciousness
big part
granting
that makes it
unicorn
emotional.
that created all consciousness.
So maybe I could
I
be
think
like
because you
super
can't
like cringe and
conceptualize it,
disgusting here and endorse like a view on in philosophy of mind called like Russellian monism, and I can just say that physical things have properties called quiddities, and it presents like certain like qualitative
I feel like you
experiences
guys aren't letting
like
me answer
at
the
the base of
question.
reality is like proto like phenomenal properties. You know, I think there's a lot of people who hold to identity theory and theories of mind, where they just say that like conscious states are identical to brain states. That seems plausible. There's lots of people who hold to like some sort of like neutral monism, like the one that I just described. Either way, I see no reason to think that like God is the answer here.
Well, I mean, what do
And-
you define as God? I think that's the issue, is because saying that a unicorn could be the same thing as God is not really understanding what
I didn't
definitionally.
say that it was the same thing as God. I'm
So,
saying that
by the way, I
consciousness
just want-
granting unicorn is the cause of consciousness. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that the
So,
unicorn
so I
is
think that what
God.
I'm
Can I
saying
be a
is
So
that,
what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
no.
that if we're going to invent explanations for things we don't understand, I'm
No,
going to
I'm not
invent an
inventing explanations, I'm
explanation
defining it.
that is actually carrying less assumptions than the God that you believe in.
So,
No, I
I
would
just want
say
to
that-
be a moderator here for a minute. So,
Yeah.
so one of the hardest problems in philosophy is the hard problem of consciousness, and it's not just hard for naturalists; it's hard for theists too. So, this is like I never talk about philosophy of mind when I'm doing any sort of debates because nobody knows what consciousness is, whether you're a theist or an atheist, whether you're a naturalist or an idealist. Nobody knows what consciousness is. Nobody has a good explanation or account of consciousness that explains all of the necessary phenomena in a parsimonious way. Like, it's a hard problem. So I don't think it gets you any win on the theism versus atheism debate. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't think it gets you there.
Well,
Yeah,
I
all
think
the
the win
positions
comes
are
from
insane,
the
yeah.
fact that God is that which bestows consciousness. So if that is a unicorn and that's what you want to believe that God is, then I don't think that that's
No,
right, because I think God is outside the
you're not
conception of
understanding
it.
my argument. My argument is that there is no God, that consciousness just comes from the consciousness granting unicorn. And the consciousness granting unicorn has a lot less entailments than a God.
Well, definitionally, what I'm saying God is, to me, is that which bestows consciousness. That is
No,
which is
I'm
outside
not
of our
using your
conception
definition of
consciousness.
God. I'm saying that an alternative explanation that carries less entailments is the consciousness granting unicorn. It's an alternative theory to God.
So Hank, question.
Wait,
you're
okay. Well, I'm trying to clarify what you mean by that alternative theory. That how does that carry? Because I feel like we're saying the exact same thing.
Just
You're
follow the
saying-
situation here. Okay, you're saying we have a
Hmm?
thing that we don't have an explanation for. You don't think there's a good explanation for consciousness. So your explanation is God, a thing we have no evidence of. I said, cool. I can make up something as well. I can say consciousness comes from the consciousness granting unicorn. If we're just making up explanations for something, I can do the same thing. You would have to provide a reason why God is more likely than the consciousness granting unicorn, because the consciousness granting unicorn carries a lot less entailments, whereas your God
So,
carries a shit ton of
Justin-
entailments.
I think
Justin,
that's
Hank
coming
is
with the
defining
preconceived
God
notion
as
of
that which
yeah.
gives consciousness. But Hank,
I
there's a
agree.
problem with that definition as well, because under that definition, you would be obligated to say that it's possible there is more than one God. You would have the God that grants consciousness, and that might not be the same entity or being that created the universe. And so then you would have two gods, or would you call the being that created the universe not God and only the thing that granted consciousness God?
Did God
Yeah,
grant
I'm
consciousness
not-
to
Into an issue.
himself?
Yeah, and I could address that because yeah, like the last guy, like one of the other guys have said, and one of the problems that's circular in theological debates is well, what created God? And I don't think we know that. I don't think that God is necessarily the most infinite thing in the universe. I don't know that God is not circular itself in time. I don't know that he was not created through evolutionary processes that are on such a larger scale that we can't even comprehend them. I don't think we know how deep.
I don't know why you would ever want to do any of that. I don't know why you would want to say
What?
any of those things that you just said. I feel like you just went knocked
Wait,
your
why
king
can't I?
over. Like why would you do? Okay, I guess. I mean, if you
Well,
think
because
that
I'm not coming from a position of I have something that I believe that needs to be believed. I'm coming from out a position of trying to obtain truth. So like,
okay, so
you know,
do you think that God gave himself consciousness?
I think that's a question that we couldn't understand with our thought processes.
So the answer is either
So-
yes or no. So either yes, God did give himself consciousness, which is a contradiction because God would need to be conscious in order to will that he has consciousness, or the answer is no, in which case you would need to reject your definition of God, that God is the giver of consciousness.
Yeah, and I don't think asking questions that aren't tautologically sound is really a disproof of anything, because I feel like you could do that with a lot of things. Like when you get into like deeper philosophy, I think yeah, you can ask a lot of questions that are not internally consistent and produce the answers that you want. But I'm saying that you get to a point where reality breaks down,
Hmm?
and we don't have answers to these questions like what was before the Big Bang, what is time, what is infinite? Is infinite a loop? Or so I think that in and of itself predicates the existence of something greater than us.
I feel like that just doesn't respond to
and-
my argument, right? I'm giving you a dilemma, either A or not A. It needs to be one or the other. That's just the law of excluded middle.
But I'm saying the existence of the dilemma is the proof of something that should be able to understand these things that are dilemmas, right? Because there are dilemmas
Yeah, it's
in.
us. You and I are the things that understand the dilemma.
But I'm saying that
Hey,
we're
me
not
too.
able to comprehend it, so that there might be a consciousness beyond us that is able to
We
comprehend
can
it.
comprehend it, though. Why are we pretending like we don't know the law of excluded
But you
middle?
can't comprehend what happened before the Big Bang, or answer the same
Sure I can.
inconsistent-
Either
Try me.
God gave himself consciousness,
The
or
same
he didn't. It's
inconsistencies
one or
that
the
are
other.
in-
It
the
has to be
same
one or the
inconsistencies that
other.
are in atheism or in
Do you
theology.
agree? Do you agree that it has to be one or
Keeps
the
trying
other?
to pivot.
Wait, okay. Well, let me focus back on. Maybe I'm not understanding.
Yeah. Do you agree
Uh,
that
I
either
guess we're just-
God had to give himself consciousness or he didn't?
No, I think something outside of God could have given him consciousness. It could
Big
be an eternal consciousness.
unicorn.
Then why do we need
Well-
God? Wouldn't the thing that gives consciousness just be that thing?
Yeah, then you could define that as a different word or say that as God also. I think that the issue with is a terminology issue.
So you
Right.
believe in like multiple gods, or
No, I believe that there is one God. Well, then you're getting back into like more. You're leaving the realm of conceptual and back into like religion. So I don't think that that's really like
Wait,
what
what?
is. Well, because you're saying where did God start, right?
No.
What gave God consciousness? Yeah, you said did God give himself consciousness, or did something else give God consciousness?
Yeah,
That was-
I guess that's possible, right? But then at that point, if you think something else gave God consciousness, then you have a bigger problem, which is that you undermined your definition of God, that God is the giver of consciousness. But if God doesn't give all consciousness, then he's not the giver of consciousness, right? Who would the thing that gives God consciousness would undermine God as the giver of consciousness?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I think again, it's a definitional issue. I think it's an issue of our language not being competent enough. Because I agree. If I say that, whatever gives consciousness is God, and we ended up giving computers consciousness in the future, then aren't we God?
No, I would
And
say no. I'd say
I
I'd
would agree
say
with
good
you. I would say
try.
no as well.
No.
So I think that in the very specific way of us addressing God in relation to human beings would be that which has bestowed consciousness onto us. And so there
That
could
which
be
has
things
bestowed
outside of that.
consciousness onto us.
God could be
And you said
infinite
you're
in
a
and of
Christian,
itself.
right?
Yeah, I am.
But like then God is so much more than that, right?
God has
Like if you're a Christian, God is also the creator of the universe. God is also the man who died on a cross. God is also the man who parted the Red Sea, depending on how
100%.
seriously you take the Bible. So
the
like
Reed Sea, I think you
it's-
mean.
the Sea of Reeds, indeed. Yeah. So like it's not like you're being awfully heretical if you're saying actually God is just the thing that grants consciousness.
Well, I think that that's the most sound definition for God. I mean, I also believe that God created the physical.
Heretic! I'll see you in hell then.
I believe God created the natural universe as well. I mean, I think that that's, to me, self-evident when I look at it, but it's not self-evident to everybody. So I think you have to kind of address things from where people are.
If God gave us consciousness, why would he give us so many like cognitive biases, right? Like we are disposed
Why would
to
he give
looking
me
for
ADHD?
True.
Right. Those are great questions, actually. I don't, I think because those are biological systems integrated with an external consciousness that's projected onto the universe.
So why wouldn't God just give us
And
like
I
an
think we see
anatomy
that
that's
when we
better,
observe.
that doesn't have these like disadvantages?
I don't know. I think you would have to understand God's purpose for creation in the first place to answer questions like that.
What is God's
And
purpose
so
for
you have to
creation?
say, I would say to test consciousness and produce some kind of result.
What is he testing?
For something? I don't know. I think that's the question. Is
why didn't he need a whole universe with planets and galaxies? Couldn't he have just made electrons have consciousness and then tested it that way? Seems kind of overly complex.
Well, I think no. I think it's
why not? If brains don't give consciousness, he could just give consciousness to anything.
Well, I think brains are like vessels to project consciousness into a 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional, however many dimensions you're interacting with.
And is that fact true independent of God, or could God make it so that electrons could have consciousness?
No, I don't think electrons could have consciousness because the way that the system's designed in the first place.
Is it because we need brains to have consciousness?
What's that?
Is it because we need brains to have consciousness?
Well, we need brains to interact with the 3-dimensional world. Yeah. And have memory. I don't know how memory storage works independent of brains. Obviously not too well, because you develop Alzheimer's, you develop different things like that. So I think there's probably a consciousness field that projects into.
This is worse than 9/11. Mr. President, they're about to hit the second tower.
Well, I don't know about a conscious. Well, yeah.
Does God store his memories in a consciousness field?
I don't know where God stores memories. I mean, I think that's it. Is there? I don't know if there's an external memory, right? I mean, who knows that answers to these questions? I mean, I think that's kind of. You get people.
I want to point out that we got to this point, like now that we're kind of probing this whole situation of God's consciousness, we get to the point where we have all of these unexplainable things. But keep in mind that you're accepting all of these unexplainable things only because there's this one thing that you can't explain, which is consciousness. So you're attempting to explain unexplainable things by more unexplainable things, which to me, I don't know, is a great route to go.
I don't think it's adding more. I think I'm saying that there is a lot of things that are unexplainable, and that then is proof of the existence of God, in my opinion. I think that there's
implies God. Interesting.
Yeah, because I think that things are understandable, and so if something can't be understood by us, then I think that something has to be out there that can understand it.
Blitz, can you explain my tummy ache?
Yeah, you shouldn't have eaten so much shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
they
then I guess
don't
God
eat
isn't
less
real.
stuff.
We explained
come
it,
on. We're done
therefore
here.
no God.
Well, I mean, if y'all have like a religious question, I'm happy. Like the biblical stuff is less interesting to me because it's such a
But that is the
such a
religious question, right?
That's my favorite question.
y'all like the biblical stuff more. Is that what
Oh, it's so
I
much
mean,
fun. It's a blast. I don't
it is
know.
a
Alright, here's
blast.
what-
Justin loves it.
Typically Christians are the
I'll
ones
give
who
you
like
one
to.
biblical thing, and then I'll jump off and let somebody else on. But I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time.
Sure, yeah. Why did God say you could own slaves?
I think that well, that's a really good question. Let me think about the answer for that. I would say that it's not necessarily inherently immoral. I think the way that the world is set up today, it is. But I think that if you look at the way the world was back then, that I don't even think that necessarily slaves were forced to be there. I think that there was a lot of different stuff going on.
That's not slavery then. If you're not forced to be there, then you're not actually a slave. The Bible
Yeah, and
describes
a lot of those will say
actual
servitude.
slavery where it says that you are personal property, like you are someone's possession forever.
Yeah, I mean we're possessions of the United States government right now.
No,
So I
we're
mean,
not. What?
But we're not.
No, we're not.
yeah, we are. If you don't pay them money, they'll put you in a cage. So I mean, like I don't. I
You
think
can leave
that
whenever you
that's
want.
not true.
I think
You
that
can
there's
leave. You can just leave.
someone there that always has control over you,
That's
and
not the same as
so
slavery,
I think that
though. That's not slavery.
Yeah, that's not
Slavery is when you're
Slavery
owned
is
as property. Like you are somebody's legal
you also
possession.
cannot leave the United States. I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you're a United States citizen and you leave, you still have
Yes.
to pay United States income tax. So
No, you
you
don't.
know, yes, you do. If
You do. You do, but
You do.
I actually
Only if you make
do,
money in
but-
America.
No, that's actually
Nope.
not true. Interested. So,
That's not true.
as somebody who's making money in another country but is a U.S. citizen, you do have to pay U.S. income tax. However, you can write off all of it as long as you're making under like 120K or whatever.
But that's kind of the like tax code is not really what I'm getting. I'm just saying that I don't think that the world is as simple as like I don't think that morality is as simple as the new form of morality that's out there.
Yeah, let's do
I don't
let's do a
think-
quick test. Would you rather be a fucking Israelite slave, where your slave owner, your slave master, can just beat you with a rod whenever he feels like it, or would you rather live right now?
I mean, it really depends on who the master was back
This
then.
is
I mean,
not a hard question.
I'd say probably right now.
Yeah.
Good answer.
And
Hey.
why? Why is that your answer?
Well, I mean, because you said that I would get beaten and everything like
Mhm.
that. It never says in the Bible it's okay to beat
Yeah,
slaves.
Yeah, it does.
Where?
Leviticus 21 or Exodus 21. Want me
In
to read
what
it?
context? Yeah, please.
Exodus 21, 20 through 21 says, when a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished. But if the slave survives for a day or two, there's no punishment because the slave is the owner's property.
And there's no context before that as to what.
It's just God
The
giving the
context
laws.
is how to beat your slaves.
Context-
Yeah, it's God's
Oh,
giving the
oh,
laws
yeah.
related to slavery. Here are the laws related to slavery.
Yeah, I mean,
You can also
Levitical
sell your
law-
daughter as a slave too.
yeah. Again, I think that that's like Levitical law. I'm not really big on. I'm not an Old Testament believer. I'm not. I'm a Christian. So
Right, but was slavery moral or immoral?
I don't think slavery in and of itself is immoral. No.
Okay, so it would be immoral. What was immoral about owning slaves from Africa?
I think the way that they're treated is definitely
Okay,
immoral.
so as long as you treat your slaves fairly, which it obviously includes beating them, it's okay to own slaves.
I disagree with the beating part, but
But the Bible
mean-
says you can beat them.
yeah, yes, I don't think it's wrong to make people work.
If I
There's
promise
a
not
lot
to
of-
beat you, would you be my slave?
No, bro, you'd have to pay me some. You'd have to give me
I
good
would,
living.
buddy.
Slaves don't get paid.
That's just not true. They get food, they get water, they get
That's not-
shelter.
You
that's
die
not
without
payment.
food and water.
Yeah.
That's
Cows
not
get food.
payment?
Cows get food and water.
How's that
You
not
heard it
payment?
here
What do you do
first,
with your
folks.
money?
We pay cows.
What do you do with your money? You go buy food, water, clothing, shelter, family, stuff for your family.
Yeah,
you
you're
buy
missing the point. What happens if you don't feed your slave?
salvation. your slave dies. I don't think
Yeah, there you
mistreating
go.
people.
Yeah,
Right.
the
I've
point
already said
the
that.
point by feeding your slave is so that you don't lose your investment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
like
have
bad
But there's
someone
a lot
doing
of
your
people
work
that own
if
slaves.
they're
I don't think
dead.
they're- Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. That's 100% true. Same
It's
thing
like not
happens with
changing the
employees
oil in your
today.
car. You got to change the oil in your car, or else you lose your investment.
Yeah, I mean, humans are utilitarian things. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. And the capitalists, socialists, slave owners, I mean, humans are used as utilities to produce goods.
So then,
Just to be
if
They always
just to
have
be
been.
clear,
So,
Hank, would you defend slavery in any other context except the religious one?
it really, yeah, I would. The context would have to be very. I think it's a very contextual thing. I just do.
So what other context is slavery okay in?
I think in certain society, well, say for instance, you have people that aren't able to take care of themselves, and they're making really bad decisions, and maybe they don't have a high enough mental capacity to provide for themselves. I don't think that having that person be as
So wait, you're telling me that you would enslave people with intellectual disability? Like what?
no, not
what,
intellectual
what an
disability.
odd
But,
choice.
that's crazy.
no,
That
I'm
seems
saying
Yeah,
people
worse
this
that
is
than
my-
normal slavery.
Yeah, this is
people
this
that-
is my
I think that
like
people that-
intellectually
people that aren't
disabled
capable of
cousin.
having-
He can't
right.
function for
I'm
himself,
not saying
and
like
as
people with
such,
Down syndrome.
I own him as property and force him to work.
Yeah, that's that. No, you know what I'm saying that people
If
that aren't able to provide for themselves, not because they're like
So why would you make them work?
down.
if they're able to do slave work, they can provide for themselves. Also, if I make a
I don't think that's
deal
not
with
necessarily
my
true. I don't think
if
that
I
when you look
if I
at
make a
society now,
deal with my
people are
neighbor
falling
to
apart.
buy her children as slaves and she agrees to sell me her children, is that okay?
In the context of today, no, I would say
Why?
that's wrong.
What's wrong
In
about
any
it?
context?
Well, because society's not structured in that way anymore.
But why is it wrong?
So
I'm
you'd be
asking
doing
a moral question,
because you'd be
not
doing
a structural
psychological damage.
question.
You'd be doing
Okay,
psychological damage.
were they
to
doing
them.
psychological damage 30,000 years ago?
Yeah, I'm sure in some contexts, yeah.
Okay, so
And
why
some
is
people
doing
do.
psychological damage bad now but good back then?
No, I think that it's a very case by case thing, just like anything else.
Right, but I'm asking
Like,
why is it
right?
good? Why is it bad now but good then?
Because society is structured in a different way.
Wait, so
But
okay,
they could structure-
what trait is true of an Israelite slave that, if true of you, would justify enslaving you?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say, well, first off, there weren't these structures of corporatism where you could go get jobs. There weren't these
There
things didn't
was.
exist.
You could get jobs.
You're
Not
wrong.
as much.
The
There's
Bible lists
mercantilism.
like 50 different jobs, and in Leviticus 25, when it says that you can own slaves, God specifically says, "Don't own your own Hebrew brethren as slaves. Only own the foreigners as slaves."
And also to be
Yeah, and a lot
clear,
of
to be
these-
clear,
He says, "If your brother falls into debt, make him work as a hired laborer."
so and if
Yeah.
if the answer to my question is that just that there's like a job market, so if the job market ever went away because the economy was in like a recession, does that mean that it would be okay to come and like enslave you?
That's what I heard.
Yeah,
Um,
Elon, would that be okay?
I don't know. I don't know. I
You
think
don't
these
know?
are
You're not
really
sure?
You don't
I
know?
think these are really contextual things.
No,
I really do.
You're not sure. You're undecided.
Yeah, I think that we live in a very plush world that's been built on the backs of people that have done a lot of hard work, and we don't
Question.
really understand the kind of situation that you could be in as a human being
So-
where being enslaved is actually a good thing. Yeah, I think
Are
we
you-
can't
it-
conceptualize that.
So, question. Let's say that you're in a situation where slavery is okay. Is it okay
Uh-huh.
to injure your slave on purpose?
Yeah, no, I disagree with that. But and the issue is that I'm not a Jew, so I think God came to end that whole Levitical.
then-
Jesus came to end the
then
whole
why did
Levitical law.
Then why did God
know-
tell people to do it then
Wait,
if it was
you guys
bad?
might call me a heretic again, but I don't know that everything in the Bible is 100% up to snuff all the time, which is why I don't love having biblical arguments. I mean, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I don't necessarily believe that, old Jewish law is something that I
But
should be
Jesus said
following.
he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. He's not getting rid of the law. The law is still there.
Oh yeah, no. well, I think that that's a little out of context. I think in
not-
fulfilling the law, he is abolishing the law. So he is
Wrong.
coming.
So he contradicted himself
Yeah,
because
that's
he said he came not to abolish the law.
Yeah, not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So he fulfilled the law in himself, and then his death then transfers over his sanctification to us. So,
But sanctification has nothing to do with whether or not you should follow the law.
Like,
The
you still
question is
think
whether
that?
or not you should follow the law.
I don't believe that you. Well, and then you have this. Also, you have the sheet dropping in front of Peter, or in front of Paul.
Acts chapter 10.
So,
It was
yeah.
Peter.
So I mean, people quote that as like, but of course, we don't even know
That's just about
what
clean and
law in
unclean
particular was
animals.
Jesus speaking about. I don't know.
It's also contradictory, right? Jesus himself says that whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. But I don't even know what the least of which commandments. I mean, he wasn't
The law.
He wasn't
The
a
law
Levitical
of Moses.
pastor. I mean, he was a Nazarene. He's from Galilee. The
It's
law of
referring
Moses
to the
is
law
not
of
necessarily
Moses.
Levitical. Not necessarily Levitical.
Yeah,
I mean,
it says
it's understood to
all
be
the
that.
laws of Moses are called the law. That's it. You can
Yeah,
add the
so-
word Levitical there. That's a useless term.
No, it's
So
not,
when
because you're
Jesus
quoting
says he
Leviticus.
didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets, he's referring to the law, all the laws of Moses.
Yeah, the laws of Moses that are not necessarily the laws laid out in the King James version of the book of Leviticus, is what I'm saying.
No, the laws don't just come in Leviticus. They're in Exodus, they're in Leviticus, they're in
But you're
Deuteronomy.
quoting a Levitical law about
No,
the
they
slave.
are not.
What?
What I'm saying
I thought you just
is
said-
all the books of the law include slavery, whether it's Deuteronomy, Exodus, or
Did
Leviticus.
they all include beating your slave?
All of them include slavery. Exodus includes beating your slave.
I'd have to hear that as well.
Are you sure? Because then it might just make you explain
No,
that
I wanna
beating your
hear it.
slave is okay in some contexts.
No. I would say, well, yeah. If your slave assaulted somebody else, or if they stole a bunch of stuff from somebody else, or raped somebody, then yeah, it's okay to punish.
What if
people
they
for-
refuse to work?
It would. I guess it would depend on the context. I mean, and what's happening.
The passage in Exodus doesn't give you a context. It says that you can beat your slave because the slave is your money.
Yeah, I would say I disagree with that. You know.
So you disagree with what the Bible says?
Yeah, I just said that I don't think that necessarily everything in the. I mean, it's a really old document. There's a lot of stuff that's
But
not necessarily.
Isn't it from God?
I don't really know where it says that it's every word in there is directly from God. No, I mean,
Well,
it's pieced
Leviticus
together. I think the King
Leviticus
James
and
did the
Exodus
best
quite
version.
clearly are saying that these things came from God. Go to Exodus chapter 21, and it says, "These are the ordinances that you shall set before them." God is talking to Moses, saying, "Set these ordinances before them." So, if God's not actually talking to Moses in Exodus 21, then why would I believe it?
No, I think God's talking in multiple.
So,
Because
did God give
I
these
think-
laws?
I think it's just like everything else. I think that you have to decide for yourself what's real and what's not. And I think the
So-
issue with a lot of this
some
stuff
of the
is, like,
Bible's not real.
I'd say some of it is definitely very human centric. Well, I mean, like, you have Song of
Well,
Solomon.
how do you know which parts are real and which ones are not?
So what's the relevance of that being in there? You have
How do you know which parts are
Ecclesiastes
real
will
and
say
which
that,
ones
like,
are not, Hank?
well, the same way you know anything.
Hank,
you use
I'm asking
brain
your
and
methodology. What's your methodology? What's your measuring stick? How do
You
you
use your
know
brain,
if you're reading a
Justin.
passage? Oh, you intuit, of course.
Yeah, you just
No,
vibe
not
your way
intuition.
through
Well,
it.
yeah, sometimes intuition. Yeah.
So I'm asking, if you don't have a measuring stick, if you don't have a method for determining which parts of the Bible are true and which is just made up bullshit, then I'm inclined to believe that it's all made up bullshit.
Well, I think that I really do think that abstraction and reasoning is underrated, and the whole objectivism and imperialism thing is overrated. I think we kind of can determine
with
what is true
imperialism.
and what's good and what's right.
Why,
I'm not
why
gonna
would
do it.
God inspire a book that's only partially true?
Because humans are not always right about everything.
No,
Right.
but did God inspire the writing of a lot of this?
Yeah, I'm sure things are God inspired. I mean, look, you
So
have to look at
if
like
God's
each
involved
translation.
in the inspiration of the book, why is he inspiring some of it but not all of it?
Well, because some of it is about people's interactions with God, and some of it is not.
But I don't
Some of
think that
it is
answers my
probably
question.
not.
I'm asking, why would God not take the time to ensure that the Bible is all true? Why do we have to go through it and be like, well, that
That's,
doesn't feel true. That feels true.
I
I
think this
think there's a lot of
problem
deception.
gets
I think
much
there's a lot
worse
of
when you
deception
consider
in
hell,
religion.
right? Like if you don't find like the truth, if you're not convinced by the book that is partially lies, you get tortured forever. Like this just
Right.
seems absurd.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really says you get tortured forever. I've never really read that. I mean, there's things about the lake of fire. There's things about eternal damnation, kind of. But then, what is
Well,
eternity? Because
there
it says
are
that there's
passages about that,
infinity.
but even if you're only tortured for 5 minutes in hell, I think it's too long. I think it's silly. But
Well, I
listen,
think there are
Hank,
people
we've
that
we've
definitely
been
should be
chatting
punished.
for a
You know?
while, and we really want to get to our
Yeah, man.
guests who've been waiting. But definitely thanks for stopping in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are cool. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you as well.
Absolutely. Cheers,
Science
man.
be with you.
Thanks.
All right, let's
Oh.
bring up Brendan. Brendan has been waiting very patiently.
Yep.
Oh, but we have some super chats.
Damn, Brandon, don't say a word.
Oh, can you hear me?
Ah,
We have to read super chats first.
gosh. Where are we?
Fern Love Bond, I think,
Yep.
is the yeah.
Fern Lovebound, or yeah, Fern Lovebond. Thanks so much for the $2. We don't believe in science; we accept findings. I agree with that. I think it's a reliable methodology. Salem, thanks so much for the $10. Oh yeah, people who study the brain for a living absolutely have no idea about consciousness, but this guest in his Bible definitely knows better. Selah, thanks so much for the $10 again. This obsession with consciousness will never not make sense to me. Of course, we developed consciousness. Humans needed it for our survival. Many animals have it too. They don't worship a god. Yeah, of course, right? Like, I don't know. That just seems like very silly. It seems like consciousness is the type of thing that could have evolved stepwise to me personally. Selah, thanks so much for the $5. Why does he fight so hard against the unicorn? It's because he knows deep down it's real and he's trying to deny the truth. He suppresses the truth and unrighteousness. Dr. Joanne, thanks so much for the $2. I guess just wants God to exist, therefore truth. Exactly. Grimlock, thank you so much for the $10. Massive W.
Grimlock.
Who I fucking love Grimlock. I die for Grimlock.
Grimlock single-handedly funds both Ian and me.
Yeah.
And maybe Justin? I don't know. Justin, does Grimlock fund you as well?
Not so much, but trust me, I got plenty of funding.
Sure.
Yeah. Grimlock is incredible. Selah, thanks so much for the $5 again. My Red Sea was parted last night.
Ayo, let's go. Get some.
Rock Hard for Doug, thanks so much for the $5. Is this who gave God consciousness such an old dilemma that we have Uranus for Zeus?
That's true, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird theology, pagan, ancient Greeks. Alicia, thanks so much for the $5. I just want to say Ian's jaw-dropping point thing is absolutely hilarious. Yeah.
Definitely is.
It's real feelings. It's a lot of real feelings behind it. Selah, thanks so much for the $10. There's a very big difference between living in a society with laws we abide by and can change, and being enslaved with zero rights, zero legal standing, and no freedom. Yeah, absolutely, like definitely, yeah. Cameron, thanks so much for the $5. Some of our guests need mental help. I think against proven science. Very boring. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I just don't know. I have no idea what would possess someone. Like, I feel like you couldn't pay me enough money to humiliate myself by like having me go up onto a panel and like disagree with like experts on it. Like, it's just humiliating. Dr. Joanne, thanks so much for the $5. Guardianship and fiduciary responsibility are not synonymous with slavery. Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
like
that was wild. That was wild.
A is A, yeah. Unashamed, thank you so much for the $5. I'm a Christian. I don't really believe all that Bible stuff. True. Eris, thanks so much for the $2. Someone check this caller's hard drive. Indeed. And Alicia, thanks so much for the $2. For the love of Doug. Oh, Alicia. See, Alicia.
Alicia.
Fuck. Alicia. For the love of Doug, Alicia. Alicia, thank you so much for the $2. I'll read your old one again because that's how much I care about getting things right. Alicia, thanks so much for the $5. I just want to say the Ian's jaw dropping point thing is absolutely hilarious. Thank you so much, Alicia, and I apologize for butchering your name. And with that, we have Brandon. What's up, Brandon?
Hello.
Brandon says that Brandon has said that all of these other people coming on are very dumb, and Brandon has a brilliant argument.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
These are famous
All right.
last words, by the way.
First off,
That's what I said.
not what I said. That is not what I said. I just
I was paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing is one way to put that, man. That was completely not what I said. All I said
You
was
said
that
because
so
frankly,
far,
those that are making arguments for God are pretty weak. LOL.
Yes, yeah, that the arguments were weak.
Okay,
at
yeah,
that
I was
point that I had
paraphrasing.
been listening to.
You're
That
right.
was all
I'm
I was
sorry.
saying. I wasn't saying that I'm better than them. I was not saying that their beliefs are less. Even though, quite
I
frankly,
was
some of
just
the
joshing
arguments were
Brandon.
crazy.
Do you think that you
I
should
was
have
just
more
joshing,
legal
but-
rights than the other guests?
No, of course not.
Should
Okay.
the other guests be allowed to be owned as slaves because they're clearly intellectually inferior?
Yeah.
No, certainly not.
Okay,
Certainly
okay.
not.
All right, so let's hear the argument.
Actually, I have a few points I really wanted to go over with you guys. First, kind of as an opener, I am Brandon. Obviously,
meet you.
I studied at Fermilab in Illinois
Lit.
with the Giant Hadron Collider. I actually did some
Wait,
classes.
but that's not a thing. That's not a thing. It's called the Tevatron.
The Tevatron, not the Hadron.
Yeah, that's the one at
Collider.
Fermilab.
I totally messed that up. But I was at the Tevatron, so I was there. Listen, it was a long time ago. But I wanted to really start off with saying this, and this was years ago in high school and then earlier in college. So I'm not a science denier, and that's one of the very first things I kind of wanted to open up with. So a little bit different. I'm also, I would say I do believe in God, but I don't follow a specific religion. I wouldn't really consider myself like Christian or Muslim or anything of that nature, but I've read about a bunch of different religions and kind of taken ideas and things that I like that I just generally think that, benefit my life, or just moral ideas that I may or may not agree with, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So one of my first things that I kind of wanted to put to you guys, and this is kind of my thought process at the very least. And I kind of want to see what you guys have to think about this. I believe that in terms of what comes after death, I would put it to you that there's obviously no way to confirm or deny what comes after death. I mean,
Yeah, I
are we in
agree.
agreement on that?
Of course.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, cool. So then it would be a pretty solid argument to say that there would be limitless possibilities.
No. So, for example, right, just because we don't know exactly what's going to happen after we die doesn't mean that there's that anything goes, right? Like, certainly after death, you don't get to experience becoming like a squared circle or something of that nature.
And certainly after death, you don't get to just be alive again in the same body in 5 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying that I believe either of those things, but I'm curious as to why you seem so adamant in that. That because only moments ago you agreed with me that there's absolutely no way we could know.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it take a tremendous amount of faith to have that level of like an adamant behavior towards that, to know I'm certain that there's absolutely nothing?
I didn't say that I'm certain that there's absolutely
Neither of us said
nothing. I'm just saying that there's possibilities and there's impossibilities, right? So I'm absolutely certain that the God, because the Bible itself is an impossibility. It's riddled with contradictions. So the idea that therefore the biblical heaven exists, well, that just seems like an impossibility given the fact that the Bible is false.
Okay, but and here's the thing. I don't even necessarily believe in that. I do believe in a higher power for sure, and I do believe in design, I would say. But I don't necessarily say, oh, there's a heaven or reincarnation or whatever the case may be. But you're saying that the idea of heaven is an impossibility. That just seems totally
At least a
not
Christian heaven.
scientific to me.
It's
at
the
all.
Christian version of heaven.
Yeah, like a
Okay.
Christian heaven is an impossibility insofar as Christianity is false.
Okay, well, again, I'm not even talking about Christianity, but
Yep.
even just the possibility of a heaven. You know what I
So
mean? Where a place
it's
where you
it's
go after you die.
possible that there's an afterlife. We just have no reason to think that there is one, and also, our parsimony demands that we reject things that we don't have evidence for, unless there's like a phenomena to explain. We shouldn't be accepting like extra things into our worldview.
Okay, but on equal stance, you also have no evidence that there isn't a heaven. You also
Well,
have no
that's yeah,
evidence that
that's
there
the point of
isn't an
parsimony,
afterlife,
right?
right?
That's why parsimony is so important. It's that given the data that we have, the most parsimonious worldview is going to be the one that says that there's no heaven and no afterlife, or at least the one that doesn't take a stance on whether there is a heaven or is an afterlife, because there's no data point to be explained here, which means that
Yeah,
it's just committing yourself to entities without gaining any explanatory power for anything.
I get what you're coming from. I get it. And the person who makes the claim, like, saying, oh, heaven exists, or, the person who makes that claim has to have proof, has to have evidence to support that argument or that claim. So by saying that, oh, there's no evidence to point towards it, the more logical thing to do is say that no, there isn't. And I understand that viewpoint and kind of that way of thinking, but at the same time, you also that's all theoretical at the end of the day. That's more so like philosophy, if you will. um
Well,
That's this whole business.
yeah, the entire
right,
thing
of,
is
of
philosophy.
course,
The entire
of
God
course.
conversation is philosophy.
Right. But I'm what I'm more so saying is that I personally, just based off of the level at which humans are able to think and understand the universe around them, um I don't think that we can definitely say that, oh well, because there is absolutely zero evidence for this, there is a stronger possibility that it's not. I would put it to you that it's probably a pretty 50-50 shot.
For in terms of heaven
It
or in
could be
terms of
right.
God?
For pretty much anything within that realm of afterlife or what comes after death, I would say that it's because we have nothing to go off of. There's no mathematical equation to say that, oh, there not being an afterlife is more likely than there is an afterlife. It's just a useful way to make an argument against something. It's just by saying, oh well, there's no evidence to point for it. And yeah, that's a good argument. But for
So
something that cannot be proven, because the reality is none of
So,
us come back from death.
Brandon,
Yes.
this topic of the afterlife, though, like the whether or not we should believe in it, is sort of tangential to the question of whether or not a designer or a creator exists.
Mhm.
So you said that you were going to bring up a few things. Why don't we talk about one of the things that has to do directly with the existence that you think lends to the existence of a creator?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, one of my and I told you I'm not a science denier, but one of the things that I
We'll see
believe,
about that.
I'm not. I'm genuinely,
I,
I'm
bel
not.
I believe that you believe that, but people have been known to not be right. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, very well. Well, and here's the thing, man. I'm on this show to discuss these things because you guys seem like some educated people, and I'm actually,
I'm just ribbing you,
yeah,
Brandon. You're good.
yeah. But I'm very very open to what you guys have to say. So if you guys make an argument that's better than mine, and I find it to be a better way of thinking, I'm open to it. So here's one of my kind of general thought processes is that math and science are the will of God. It's the code that we have in our universe. The same way, a very popular theory that we're living in a simulation and that whatever it's coded, whatever the case may be, okay. And again, not necessarily even saying that I believe in that, but I believe that math and science is the code of the universe. We
What's the
obviously
evidence for
have,
that?
well, I mean, the fact, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there's any evidence for the fact that someone did necessarily code it in, but I believe that it is, I mean, math and science within itself is incredibly structured. It's incredibly structured. I mean, it would pretty much be there's the basic laws of our universe, right? Gravity. Like you drop something, it will fall to the ground due to the mass of our planet. It's there's certain laws that are observable. All of math and science is observable in our universe, and that for me is, you know, compelling. It's not necessarily evidence that it is code or that it's someone's design, but it's very compelling because math and science is very intelligent. You know what I mean?
No,
So
I don't know what you mean at all. So I think that we could equally explain it. So I might posit the explanation that actually what's going on here in all of these interactions is that all these like particles have properties. These properties have dispositions. They have powers. They do specific things in specific circumstances. That seems like it explains things equally as well, but without needing to appeal to like any sort of God.
Right, and again, that's not even necessarily what I'm saying with this. I'm just saying like that's my general, like that is something that's
But
always been compelling for
what's the
me.
evidence? Well, that's just like a worldview. Like, what's the evidence for it?
Sure, yeah, and I mean, again, there is absolutely no
Then why
evidence.
believe it? It's less parsimonious than just thinking that particles have properties and that they have like
Right.
dispositions.
And if you have, I believe in, I'm a very big contributor to Occam's razor as well. It's a big part of my belief system that the simplest answer is
Is it?
usually the most correct. And I believe that it's a lot less likely personally that math and science and the universal rules of the universe just happened, and again, that it kind of, there's more to it than that too, because it's like, you know one of the things I like to think about is kind of early human intelligence, and as we're going through the Renaissance and kind of growing as a civilization, at one point we thought the sun revolved around the earth, and then some brighter minds came along and said, well, no, actually we're revolving around the sun. And then they're like, okay, but there's still only one sun, and we're like, oh no, actually there's like trillions of them, centillions of them, you know what I mean, just an infinite amount of them. And then we're like, okay, but there's probably only one galaxy. And, then we're like, okay, there's probably only one universe. And then you get into multiverse theory, which, not a fan. Not a fan of multiverse theory.
Oh, they missed the third tower.
Not a fan at all. No, I'm serious. I'm genuinely questioning.
It's you
Well,
just
it depends
give
on
like
which
a
version
you
you
just
mean.
give like a big long critique of like science, right? Like to be clear.
My point is that, humans get very, very certain of something just because a very large group of people says it. And in doing so, they cut themselves off to possibilities. My general
That's an
belief,
excellent piece of psychology. We need evidence, right? Like, what is the evidence
for what specifically? Sorry.
for your belief system?
Well, it's just my observations. It's just my
Which
observations,
ones?
and it's my understanding of, science and patterns. And you see science in everything. You see math and everything. You see the Fibonacci sequence
Cool.
repeated in nature for efficacy.
So
And you have a cellular level intelligence where a cell does not have a brain. You have
So, Brandon,
cellular intelligence. How do you think
cells
DNA?
just-
How do you think DNA forms?
DNA forms via DNA replication. Are you asking like at the abiogenesis level or like at the mitosis level?
At the very, very base level, how do you believe
That's
that
not an
DNA
answer to the
forms?
question. Do you mean during like mitosis or during abiogenesis?
I'm not familiar with those two terms, and I'm not going to
Gotcha.
pretend that I
You
am.
don't know. Wait, you're a science guy, but you don't know mitosis?
No,
That's like
I studied
unironically high
these
school
things a
biology.
very, very long time ago, man. It doesn't pertain to my career, so it's not
Okay.
something that I've kept up
But
with.
Brandon,
But-
you do remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yes, everybody remembers that. Of course.
All right, I'm just checking,
Absolutely.
just making sure. So Brandon, look, the problem is we both make the same observation. All four of us make the same observation that it turns out that math is really, really good for describing the natural world, right? And in some
Yes.
sense, science is the application of that mathematics to predictions about the natural world. The question then is, why is it so effective at describing the natural world? And so what you're positing is you're saying, well, it's because the natural world encodes math itself, and that therefore leads you to some notion of a coder. But if we have an alternative explanation, and that alternative explanation makes all of the same predictions, it matches all of the expectations that we have, how do we figure out who's right? How do we figure out that your explanation is correct and ours is incorrect?
Well,
that's what we're asking for evidence
that's
for.
my point. That's my point, though, is that you can't. That's impossible. It's like just banging.
But then you're
your
just
head
saying that
together
there's
for
no
reason.
evidence.
There's
You're
no
just saying that
evidence
there's
for
no-
either side. It takes just as much faith to believe that that's not the
I
case as
hate
it
that
takes to
sentence.
believe.
I hate that
It's
sentence. so
true,
much.
though. It's so
It's not
true.
because I mean you've heard the arguments that we've given, right? There are plenty of arguments for like the the non-existence of a creator being. Plenty of
But there's
arguments for the
not.
non-existence.
There's no evidence to support that there is not a creator. It's not something you
well,
can ever actually disprove.
Is there
Sure there is.
is there
There's tons.
evidence that the tooth fairy doesn't exist?
No, there is not.
But hold
So
on.
then
hold on.
by
There is
your same
evidence that God
argument,
doesn't exist.
It's 50-50.
Allegedly, yes. Allegedly.
So shit. Praise tooth fairy. Sorry, Bugs. Go ahead.
and
So
here's
there
the
is-
thing. Well, hold on. Let me touch on that because I was cracking up when you were talking, and that's why I shared that file, because I'm at least understanding of that concept. That yes, hypothetically speaking, that can be applied to anything, correct? But there's a reason that we're not talking about the tooth fairy, and that's because we know as human beings that it's the parents that are putting the money under the pillow and taking the tooth.
What?
We understand that. We know that. Okay?
I don't know that.
That's not a secret. That's not a secret. We understand.
So-
We understand that the parents buy the gifts. There is no Santa Claus.
My mother would
but
not lie
what
to
we
me.
don't understand, the whole premise of your entire talk show here is about God. So obviously this is something that's a little bit more
Brandon, let me give you the
this is
evidence.
a larger thing than something regarding the tooth fairy or Santa Claus. This is something, it's the creation of our known universe.
But Brandon,
Brandon.
just pay
Creation of our
attention. The reason why these types of arguments happen, like tooth fairy or Russell's teapot, things like that, is to demonstrate that you can't bring proof of something that doesn't exist. Like if something doesn't
You
exist,
can bring
you'll
evidence, though.
Right. You can bring evidence surrounding the matter, but you're never going to have proof that something doesn't exist, because if it doesn't exist, there isn't proof. What you can do is you can look at the evidence you have available and say, okay, given the evidence we do have, what's more parsimonious?
Or
And
more likely, even.
exactly. The evidence that we do have, I can't find reason to think that it's pointing to God.
So, in fact, one of the ways that we can establish, at least, that it's less likely that a God exists than otherwise, is by using a pretty straightforward application of the scientific method, right? So, we look around at the world. We interact with other humans, perhaps, and we make the observation that every time I encounter a mind, something that's capable of thinking or having rational discussion, whatever, it seems to be attached to a brain. And so then we make the hypothesis, every mind is attached to a brain. So we then just go look for other minds, and we find that the only time minds ever seem to exist is when they're attached to brains. Now, that's not definitive proof. It could be that there are minds that are not attached to brains that we've been missing, but it is evidence that every mind is attached to a brain. And if there's evidence that every mind is attached to a brain, that's evidence against a mind that's not attached to a brain, i.e., a spirit or a God. So, that is evidence that makes the God hypothesis less likely. Now, you might say, well, it doesn't give it a 0% chance, but it does make it less likely, right?
Okay, I understand. I understand kind of where you're coming from, and I definitely understand kind of what the argument is there. But I don't think that that's applicable to something like this. That's kind of my whole point, is that's a very rational way of thinking, and it may even be the most rational way of thinking, potentially.
But it's not
even
applicable
still,
to use rationality?
With the concept of what comes after death or what is beyond our universe, it is just so far beyond our standing that I think it is just very brash. It is a very bold thing to apply to the concept of the afterlife, or the concept of another dimension, or and I'm pretty sure you guys and look, again,
Brandon, why are you talking about the afterlife as though God existing proves an afterlife?
It doesn't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily. But
right, I think those are two different ideas.
Sure, yeah. I guess my question for you guys really is then, so I obviously understand that you guys don't believe in God. Are you open,
Yeah, of
philosophically,
course,
to the concept of an afterlife?
Yeah, of course.
We're open to whatever is true.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm open to God being real. If somebody presented me with an argument that indicated that God is real,
I'm open to Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally rational. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. That was more so my argument, and I wish I had gotten to the meat of that a little bit earlier. because that was kind of my confusion. Was I thought that you guys were like very firm in the belief that there is
Oh, we are.
nothing.
That doesn't mean that we're not open, though.
Yeah, right. So we're
Okay,
so
wait, whoa, hold on a sec. Whoa, hold on. Let me
I'm
back
quite
up here. Wait.
convinced for my position, but if somebody unconvinced me of my position, then I would just switch positions.
Right.
So, okay, wait, well, hold on a second. Hold on a sec. Okay, hold on. Let me back up a little bit. So you guys are very firm in the belief that there is nothing after death.
We're quite convinced, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys
I
are
am,
quite
yeah.
convinced. But we obviously know that we die, right? Like whether there is absolutely nothing or whether there is something, that is something that you and I will never know within our lifetimes. Correct?
If by no we mean like are certain of like can like empirically verify,
Yes.
then yeah, we won't be able to empirically verify it. But if by no we mean no in like the classical like philosophical sense of the word, we just mean like an apt true belief. We can know that there's nothing outside. Like if we know that like physicalism is true because we have good arguments for physicalism, then and one of the entailments of physicalism is that there's no afterlife. Or if we know that naturalism is true because we have good arguments for naturalism, and one of the entailments of naturalism is that there's no afterlife, then in that sense we can know that there is no afterlife.
I don't think that's really. I mean, yeah, I would say that in general, when it comes to science, you'd always want to use the empirical definition of no. I mean, you know, I at least if
Asking
you're
about what
following
happens
true
after
science.
death is not scientific. This isn't a scientific question, right?
But I mean, sure, yeah, because it can't really be solved by science. You can say it's not a scientific
It's
question,
just not
but
observable.
whether there is or is not an answer for you and me as people who are currently alive, there is an answer. There is an answer.
Are you
Whether
suggesting
there's
that dead people are
nothing-
doing science?
No, I'm
Because
not necessarily
maybe
saying
they
that,
are.
but what I'm saying is that if there was an afterlife, which you guys are even saying that you don't deny that there is a possibility of an afterlife. You argue that it's less likely. And I do disagree with that. I genuinely believe, personally, my viewpoint is with this that it is pretty much a 50-50 shot. There could be nothing. There could be something, and that something could be anything. You could pull off a VR helmet and be like, "Wow, that was a crazy game." You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, seriously, this could. There's infinite chances.
and everybody in this conversation could be a hologram, and I could be the only real one. Like, but you know, we don't. That's not how we judge the world, right? Just because something's possible doesn't mean it's plausible.
That's not the world. That's something outside of our world. Do you believe in other dimensions? Like, do you believe in like the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension? Like,
not spatial dimensions, no.
Okay, so you don't believe in like spatial dimensions. Very well, very well.
Well, no, I don't believe in more than 3 spatial dimensions, no.
Okay. I know that was like a theory that was getting passed along for a while, but
it's required by string theory. I'm not convinced of string theory.
Dr. Bliss, didn't you write your PhD dissertation on one of the dimensions?
My PhD dissertation was kind of more general than that. It was on like, I mean, it focused on 5 dimensions, but like, it was most of it was a very broad analysis of like a trend that happens in all dimensions greater than 2.
Okay, very well. I mean,
but that's neither here nor there. So, Brandon, anything else you want to talk about, or should we call it there?
I guess my one last thing that I really wanted to I had 2 more things that I wanted to ask you guys about. So first would be the conservation of energy, right? The idea that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So do you guys ascribe yourselves to the Big Bang Theory in general, in terms
Probably
of the creation
not the
of the
version that
universe?
you think, but yes. No.
So
no.
In what way?
The scientific consensus is that there was a Big Bang, but it's not that it was the beginning. It's that it was an event that took place. The universe was 13.8 billion years ago. The universe was very small and very hot. And then after 13.8 billion years ago, it started to expand. Now, there is no consensus about whether that was the first moment, or whether there were moments before that, or whether there was an infinite number of moments before that. There is no consensus about that fact. But that is a fact that the universe was very, very small and very, very hot a long time ago.
Yes, and I'm quite aware of that. Um, but and again, that is something that I also believe, because I know that we've, supposedly detected gravitational waves from the actual.
No, we have not. We want to, but that's still in the works. We haven't detected gravitational waves from the
Okay,
Big Bang yet.
I thought that we had. I thought I saw something that was saying that we had, but if we haven't, then like I said, I'm very open to that. But if energy can't be created nor destroyed, I mean, does that just like so then? What is your? I don't want to say belief, but what do you think? What do you think? Do you think everything has just always been? Do you think
Well, that's
there
one
was a
way.
beginning?
But also keep in mind, energy conservation is not an absolute law. Energy conservation is a law that applies in certain systems that match or that meet certain criteria. It might be the case that the universe as a whole is not one of those criteria, or is not one of those situations that meets that criteria. It could be
Okay.
that energy is not conserved in the universe as a whole. In fact, this is what's generally believed, because dark energy seems to be increasing the energy of the universe as a whole. Make of that what you will.
Yeah, I actually I don't know if you guys know who Dan Hooper is, but I've got a couple of his books on dark energy.
I
That
have
was part
no
of one of
idea who
the.
that is.
Yeah, he was a physicist and a theoretical physicist
I
at
think he's
Fermi
still
Lab.
alive.
He is. Yeah, he is.
Okay.
He's not. I'm sorry. I'm saying was in the context of when I met him.
I see.
You know what I mean. But yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. But what is your thought process? So what do you think? Like, do you just basically just say, well, I have no idea? Is that kind of your stance, or I mean, which I mean would be a
Personally,
totally logical stance.
personally, I lean towards the universe having always existed.
Okay.
Um, but that's like, in some sense, it's a minimally evidenced bias. I'm
Right.
open to it having had a beginning just as well.
Okay. That makes sense. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, do you think that something can come from nothing? Because in
No, but
general,
that's
I
that's not that's
reject
not
that.
required for it to have a beginning.
How would that not be required?
So if it has a beginning, all that means is that there's a first moment of time. But that doesn't mean that space began to exist then as well. It could be that you could have and this is a model that was proposed by Hawking and a collaborator of his in the 80s. It could be that you can have a timeless space, a space that just exists timelessly, and not even forever, but like absent time, and that at a certain place in that space is where time starts. And so in that case, there is a first moment of time. That first moment of time is at that place. And yet, the universe, there was no time when the universe didn't exist, because there was always, there was just a timeless universe in some sense prior to that.
That seems to make very little sense to me.
Yeah, it's
Like
really
the
hard to explain.
concept of
A
the
diagram makes it
concept
easier,
of
but yeah, it is really hard to explain. But this is like a serious idea that was put forward by, I mean, like Stephen Hawking came up with this idea. Stephen Hawking and James Hartle. So it's not like a nonsense, wacky idea. This was taken very seriously.
yeah, I get that, but I mean, it's just I feel like you have to have something. I mean, what? How could you? The universe and everything that's in it, and just billions and trillions of stars and galaxies and black holes, dark energy, dark matter. I mean, what the heck? You know what I mean? How do you rationalize the idea that it just suddenly was with nothing
Well,
setting it in motion?
the point is that it wouldn't have suddenly been. In either scenario that I've laid out, either where it always existed, in which
Well,
case
sure,
there
the
never
timeless
suddenly was
space.
anything.
Yeah, so your grid, essentially your timeless space had always existed, but the universe itself didn't.
No, but I mean, the universe is just like attached to that timeless space, and that timeless space would have had stuff in it, right? It would have had like quantum stuff going on, not going on in time, but like it would have had like a quantum behavior or quantum description.
But if that was the
So
case, if nothing was setting anything in motion and nothing created anything, wouldn't there just be nothing? Like, wouldn't that why would any of these
well, now you're
subatomic
asking why is
particles
there
even
something rather than
exist?
nothing. Now you're
Yeah,
asking why is there
right.
something rather than nothing. That's a great question, but I could ask you the same question. And whether or not a god exists, you don't get out of that question, because I could just say, well, why is there a god rather than nothing at all?
Right. But wouldn't that equally apply to all of these scientific ideas that
It
Hawkins
absolutely
and
would.
anyone?
It's not a question that anybody knows the answer to, but we can talk about how the universe exists.
Or at
Maybe it
least
existed
our
forever, or maybe it had a
best
beginning and then it exists
understanding.
timelessly. Yeah, I mean, like, we can talk about those things, whether or not we know the answer to why is there something rather than nothing.
Yeah, and I think that by that logic, it would be more probable that there was something else, perhaps something that exists beyond our realm of existence. And you
But then
know,
why is there that thing rather than nothing?
one of the things, and you had said this earlier, was that you don't believe in extra dimensions. I personally do. I don't believe that our dimension of existence is the only one. I do personally believe in multiverse theory, that there are an infinite amount of universes, and I'm kind of I need to read more about string theory before I necessarily say that I believe or don't believe in it.
That set of words was Dr. Blitz's Gettysburg.
Gettysburg? How do you mean?
It was an quintessential loss of life of my soul.
How so? What about it specifically?
It's an inside joke, but essentially, when people say things about string theory without knowing anything about string theory, it makes me very sad.
Yeah, that's and hey, listen, man, I'm not talking necessarily about string theory. All I'm saying is that I don't believe this is our realm of existence. And my reasoning for that is very, very simple. It's not highly scientific. Here's my reasoning. As I was saying earlier, we thought at one point there was one sun, then we thought there was one galaxy, then we thought there was one universe. I don't think that's a very good way of thinking. I think that through discovery we've shown that that's a really poor way of thinking. That we think, oh, there's only one of this, and then we always end up finding out, oh, there's actually an infinite amount of
And
these
first
things.
we thought that there was only one God.
Sure.
Brandon,
I'm not even.
We only have half an hour left, roughly, and we do want to talk to at least one other person. So is it fair if we move on? Because I think we talked about 3 topics.
Yeah, absolutely, man. 100%. I do appreciate you guys' time. You guys were fun to talk to. I do feel like I learned a lot from this stream. Definitely going to do some reading, and for what it's worth, I am going to subscribe to you guys, and hopefully I'll be on the show again sometime in the future.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody who's watching, subscribe.
I appreciate it. Hey, you guys have a great day.
No, you.
You too.
All right, let's bring up Duke Dennis.
Yep. Hey, Duke, how's it going? Oh, wait, do we need to read Super Chats first?
Do we have Super Chats? Do it.
Gymnasty K Batch, thanks so much. When Klansmen like Hank exhibit white supremacy talking points is some cultures just aren't competent or advanced and need to be enslaved, I scream. True. Nolan, thanks so much for the $20. Hey, Justin, nice to meet your friends. This is awesome. Started to feel like when I met Matt Dillahunty and Jeff D were co-hosts. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Nolan. Appreciate it.
My friends are way smarter than me.
That's not true. You're highly
We just
intelligent.
each have our own thing.
Yeah. We just have like we all just have different brands of autism, I think. Adele, thank you so much for the $5. Well, we have the same brand of autism. We just have different hyperfixations. But Adele, thanks so much for the $5 on YouTube. Appreciate that. Bro, I saw a science in high school. I'm totally not a denier. DeQuester's Lab, thank you so much for the $5. If God tuned the universe like a fine instrument, it would require a tuning fork. So can we rename the argument the tuning fork argument? That's fun. I don't know. I like that. Sala, thank you so much for the $5. This guest lacks an understanding and knowledge doesn't equate to there being a God. Lack of understanding and knowledge doesn't equate to there being a God. Sorry to break it to you, Brandon. True. Yeah, I just don't know how we get to like therefore God. Terrence, thank you so much for the $5 Australian dollary dues. Can Blitz give a quick 30 seconds about what's on the board behind him?
I'll be so much faster than this. It was just a scratch calculation my PhD supervisor and I were doing on the blackboard for my thesis. That's all.
Fun. Jay Clark, thanks so much for the $2 on YouTube. What does the upside down delta symbol mean? The triangle?
It's not upside down. It's right side up. It's a delta. I mean, it's a Laplacian. Oh wait, no, you're talking about one of these ones. That's a gradient operator or a divergence operator. It's also known as a nabla.
That sounds fake. I don't believe you.
You learned about it in Calc 3, Ian. You have a degree in math.
Wait, which one is this? It's the
Nabla.
Is this
It's
the upside down triangle?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, wait, then I am familiar with this. Okay.
Yeah.
Gymnastic K Vetch, thank you so much for the $5. Brandon needs to first read the warning label on bleach before drinking it next time.
Don't be mean to Brandon. Brandon was a nice guy.
Brandon doesn't deserve this. You can't be mean to Brandon. I won't let you.
He was nice to us.
All right, Duke.
Hey, what's up, Duke? Duke, are you there?
Duke?
Wyatt, are you there? Wyatt?
What? No, hold on. Duke's got to be here, right? This would be so embarrassing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is that Duke?
Yep.
Yeah.
Duke shows
Okay.
up.
Duke, we can hear you.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I was hearing the arguments about I think, evidential problem of evil. I find it unconvincing, like the proposition that God doesn't exist. Sorry, evidential meaning God likely doesn't exist. I find that unconvincing.
Why?
Can you try and explain the argument?
Sure. So the argument is just about hypothesis comparison. You're asking like what would you expect if there was a God who is all good, all loving, all powerful, and this God made the earth with perfect knowledge of everything that was going to happen. You would expect like basic evils, like things like the fact that the sun gives us cancer, or the fact that kids get cancer, or the fact that like malaria exists. You would expect these things to not be here, but instead they're here.
Yeah, I think the Bayesian is a Bayesian inference, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's making the assumption that these things are going to be immoral, and that's going to be unexpected under the hypothesis that God is an all-good being. So, like, what's going to be the argumentation supports the claim that these things are immoral or likely to be immoral?
So it doesn't necessarily presuppose that they're immoral, just that the world would be like a better place, or like a place that God would more prefer. That God presumably doesn't prefer it when we die of malaria. God doesn't like it when kids die of cancer. If he's all good, all loving, that's just highly unexpected. That God is like loving and good and just, but he allows kids to die of cancer. In fact, he facilitated it. He makes it such that the sun gives us cancer. It's just highly unexpected.
And you can attribute that to his omnibenevolent nature, correct?
Yeah, just him being like all good and all loving. Yeah, it just seems to be like highly surprising, right? Like, I don't know, maybe like an intuition pump on this would be, let's say you had like an all good doctor, and in front of this all good doctor was a button, and if you push the button, then it's just going to cure cancer from every kid everywhere. In fact, like every person everywhere. Presumably the all good doctor would push that button.
Yeah, I think the issue here is that it's like there's two possible issues. Either it's going to be an axiological mismatch problem, or it's a category error. For instance, we'll be assuming that based on our own intuitions, that curing all cancer is a good thing. And that may seem to be the case prima facie, as we're decreasing the amount of deaths. However, decreasing the amount of cancer overall would actually increase the population, which may entail some other negative effects that we're not aware of, as well. Obviously we're not omniscient. Therefore, it's possible that there's some justification for what God did or indirectly caused, such as the cancer being caused by the sun and some other things, other events, etc.
Sure, that just leaves us like completely morally paralyzed. If God wouldn't solve cancer because it could lead, there's like some chain reaction that would happen that causes like some greater evil, then presumably if we like stumble upon like a kid getting raped, we shouldn't interfere because there could be like some chain reaction, greater good that comes from it. Like at that point, we just know nothing about morality.
Yeah, that wouldn't be in the entailment. It would be okay for us to act on our intuitions, but for God, due to his actual knowledge on the topic, it would be unworthy. Sorry, not worthy. It would be, I guess, he ought not do it because he knows of the entailment. Whereas
But
we don't know the entailment.
we know that God's not interfering with the kid getting raped, so we could infer based on that there's some higher purpose that God has in mind of the kid of not stopping the kid getting raped.
But that's not going to be the case, because if we have an intuition for stopping the grape, that's going to be indirectly caused by God creating us. Therefore, it would follow that God most likely ingrained that disposition into us in order to stop that kid from being raped.
So if we stumble upon like a kid getting
raped,
raped, under the hypothesis that God exists, if we stumble upon a kid getting raped, do we know that God isn't stopping the kid getting raped?
We wouldn't know, but obviously it could be the
If
case of God's
God
causing it
was
through
stopping
us.
it, then wouldn't it have been stopped?
Wait, we could just be using us to stop it.
Oh, but if he
That's what
knows
I'm
that we're
saying.
not going to stop it because we figure that if there was a good reason to stop it, then he would have stopped it, then what?
That wasn't the prior hypothesis, but yeah, then now make the inference from there that most likely there's no issue with that. That's merely going to be an intuition.
There's no issue with interfering with the kid getting raped?
No, I'm saying that under that hypothesis, I would infer that God likely has no issue with us not interfering. That's what I would assume. But I still don't see the
Sure,
contradiction.
I take that as like an absurdity, right? To say that like there's situations where you're morally justified in letting kids get raped. Like that just seems absurd.
I think we can all agree it's going to be immoral under our view, but obviously depending on some other view or like the norms ethics God may hold to, it may not be immoral. So this is going to be a category error.
Yeah, listen, I just take that as the reductor to the view. Like there's genuinely I feel like at this point, like there's almost like nothing to do other than just like circle the point that you're saying that sometimes it's okay to let kids get raped.
That's not what I'm saying. This is just merely an appeal to emotion or aesthetic.
I mean, what it is like, I don't know, like at that point, we just don't know anything about morals, right? Like if stumbling upon a kid getting raped, the entailment of this is that you're justified in not stopping the grape. Like that's just an absurdity to me. Like, I don't know. If you don't share this intuition, then that's fine, I guess, right? Like I think that this is like, if this isn't immoral, then nothing is immoral. Like I don't even know what morality means at that point.
So I think it's best we just take this a step back. So I think we're assuming a view of God where, well, I guess we're assuming DCT here. I'm guessing that's what we're assuming, correct?
We're assuming
Divine
what?
command theory? Divine command theory. I think that's what we're currently assuming, correct?
I mean, although you could say something, I don't know. I don't really think I actually don't think that I'm assuming that, no.
Okay. So what metaphysical view are you assuming there for God?
I don't per se think that I am assuming like a metaethical view, just that if there is a good God in like any sense of good, whether it be like goodness is a property outside of God, goodness is just a property of God's nature, or goodness is like whatever God says is good, whatever it be, doesn't really matter. If God has sufficient reason to not stop a kid getting raped, then that confers to us the exact same justification to not stop that.
Yeah, but once again, I did explain that so we both agree that we would most likely feel some sort of way about that interaction, which would prompt us to try and stop that interaction, correct? We would both agree on that.
Yeah, but logically, we would be morally justified in like just walking away.
But we wouldn't be though, because so under the hypothesis that God actually exists and did all these things and indirectly caused our existence, it would also indirectly cause us to have the disposition to stop the grape. Therefore, it's likely that due to that disposition that He's instilled within us, He wants us to go and stop that grape.
But if
also,
you don't but if you don't stop the grape, then God would already know that you were never going to stop the grape. Which means that
we have
him not stop the fact that he knew that you weren't going to stop it, and the fact that he's not stopping it, means that you are justified in not stopping it because there's just some greater good that comes out of it. Like I feel like that's like the types of absurdities that it leads to.
Well, I thought this wouldn't be a reductio ad absurdum because it doesn't really elicit any contradiction. But also, I'm very unsure what you mean by God stopping it Himself. Like, would God come down to creation?
Yeah, you can just like teleport the grapist into the sun.
But he could also just make someone else stop the interaction, correct?
Yeah, he could, but he would need to know that that person is actually going to stop the interaction. If he foresees that person not stopping the interaction and still allows the interaction to take place, then everyone involved can go forward knowing that he has like some greater divine purpose to this interaction.
But if we both agree that majority of people have a disposition to stopping the interaction due to some shared moral intuition, then it's more likely that the interaction is started by an individual, which would allow us to make the inference that God instilled that into us because He wants us to stop it.
Wait, but would God know whether or not you're going to?
God would know, but we wouldn't know. Hence, it's going to be an inference.
Yeah, wait. So let's say that you, in that moment, make the decision not to, and then you can just find yourself completely and 100% justified in not stopping it because God knew that you weren't going to stop it. God knew that nobody was going to stop it, but God allowed it to happen anyway, which means that God would only allow it if there was some higher good, which means that you can infer that there's some like higher good to this instance of child grape. I take the idea that there's like some higher notion, like some higher good to a child getting raped is an absurdity.
I agree with that. But if the condition was met, then that would be the entailment, I guess. I would agree with that. But the condition was not being met. The condition to actually be met is that we do share the moral intuition, that we ought stop the grape of an individual. We ought to that. Majority of people share that.
Is it logically possible that you stumble upon this situation and then just choose not to stop it?
There's some other possible world where that would occur. Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. So in this possible world where you stumble upon it and then don't stop it, can you feel confident that God had some higher
But it
purpose
doesn't
to it?
exist though. The possible doesn't exist, and also it's
Wait,
not the
wait,
actual
wait. Does
world.
it? Is it a possible world or no?
Possible. Wait, do you think possible worlds exist?
I'm asking you. Does like the possible world? Is it possible? Could it have happened? Could it
Presumably.
happen?
It could happen, yeah, but it doesn't happen in the actual world. Hence, it being a possible world rather than the actual
Is
world.
it? Is
Also,
it
more
impossible for this scenario to happen in the real world?
impossible? Well, okay, so yes, it's impossible to happen.
To be clear,
in this
this
actual
does
world.
happen in the real world a lot. People see abuse happening and then don't do
I'm-
anything about it. That
I'm
does
aware
happen a
that's
lot.
going to be distinct from this actual. This is going to be distinct from that actual event. Of course, there may be similarities between the events, but we can both agree the events are not numerically identical. Therefore, you can't make that argumentation. The events would have to be identical in the same time for that to be this,
Wait.
make that argumentation.
Sorry. The point that I'm making is just that there are cases where people see child rape happening and then don't do anything about it.
Yeah, that would just increase.
That
all
is
that does is
precisely the point that
Yeah.
Ian is asking. Is that possible? That's all Ian is asking. And of course
It's
it's possible. It happens.
It's possible, but I'm saying it wouldn't occur under this view. It wouldn't occur.
Well, it does occur.
But
Then
in the
wait.
actual world,
So if your view is true, it wouldn't occur, but it does occur. Therefore, your view is false.
no, it does occur in possible worlds, but obviously possible worlds are
It
distinct from
occurs in the actual world.
world.
It occurs in
No,
the
it
actual
occurs in the
world.
actual world.
I
It's a
know it
real
occurs
thing
in
that
the actual world
happens.
in other events, but I'm saying in this specific event, this particular
Wait,
event.
so let's go to like a specific event, right? So you would say that,
That
in all of
actually
the
happened.
times in the actual world where people encountered children getting raped, that there was like some higher good to it.
But I think okay, I'm obfuscating, by the way. I just want to draw it back because I think I misunderstand what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to explain what I'm trying to say because I think we're misinterpreting it. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So we have events 1 and we have events 2, and then we have like a 3, and a 3 is just a collection of events. What you're referring to is 3. 3 is a collection of events that increases the probability of that occurring because we've seen it in the past before. Therefore, it could occur. And depending on the amount of times it occurs and frequency, it may be more likely, it may be less likely. Now, 1 and 2 are just saying that if it was the case, with disposition to do X in event 1, we are likely to do X. All 3 is saying, which is the collection of prior events, is saying, well, it's possible for us to not do X, which is already going to be explicated by saying it's likely, because it's obviously possible that the alternative occurs. The alternative occurring is less likely due to disposition. So I'm agreeing with you. It's definitely possible, hence it being a possible world, but possible worlds are going to be distinct to the actual world such that the events are going to be, well, one could be the negation, the other one could be affirmation, one could be distinct in that way. If that makes sense.
So maybe I can just reframe the question because I think this will get to the heart of it. Of the people who have seen a child rape happen and did nothing about it, they had the power to stop it, but they chose not to, are they justified in not feeling guilty about that?
No.
Why not?
It
Can't
seems like
Can't they
it's-
know
Yeah,
via
go
the
ahead.
argumentation that God is like some higher good?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it has to be some shared moral intuition. So we'd have to all say that
the
majority of people
question
hold
is
that view.
just, can't they feel confident that God is some greater good?
No, because majority of people don't hold that view.
Well, but I'm just asking you, wait, couldn't like an individual person who believes in God, and allowed like a child rape to occur, can they feel confident in their decision that God is some greater good for this?
Can is impossible? Yeah, sure, it's possible, but it would be wrong to do
I
so.
take that as an
So-
absurdity.
Wait,
Saying
you think
it's
it's
why would-
possible,
why would-
it's possible for a child
Wait.
rape enabler to feel like they did the right thing,
It's
like to be
possible?
like logically justified under like the God worldview to believe that they did the right thing. That to me is just an
That's not what I
absurdity.
said, though. Yeah, that's not what I said. I said it's possible for them to feel that way. But then I said afterwards, before I got cut off, was that's obviously going to be wrong. Because the shared
Why
moral
is it
intuition.
wrong?
Because the shared moral intuition here is that we ought stop the interaction. And if we ought stop the interaction that's shared by majority of people, we can make the inference that God instills that disposition. Therefore, it's likely that God also shares that intuition with us.
Well, wait. So
But
clearly,
if-
God doesn't share that intuition because God didn't stop it.
Okay,
there
just
you go.
maybe let me clarify. The events you're referring to, people not stopping the interactions, is that very frequent, or is that just like a very small amount of cases?
It happens more in
Yeah.
the Catholic Church than you'd like it to happen.
Yeah.
But is it frequent, like in all
Yeah, it's pretty
cases?
frequent. Well, yeah, it's frequent. Yeah.
So majority of cases where people see rape, they just don't interact and they just don't stop it, correct?
I don't know if I'd make like
if
a
we have data
majority
on that.
claim. That sounds like an empirical matter. I have no idea.
Yeah, but do you think, at the very least, the majority of people would interact when they see like someone getting raped, for instance?
That seems like an empirical question. I have no idea.
I know, but I'm saying,
The bystander effect is pretty strong. I actually wouldn't be surprised if most people just kind of turn their brain off and look away.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, right? Like I could go either way. Like people's moral intuitions could be outrageous, or they could be outraged and do something, or they could be like, I'm gonna mind my business and then not do something. I could see it going either way.
I don't see it being mutually exclusive for them to have the moral intuition to they ought to do something, but maybe do some like other maybe I don't know the beta states or hedonic states just not doing so. I don't see that as mutually exclusive. So it could be the case they feel a certain way that they should do something, but they just don't do something because of other factors.
I mean, even I could be swayed. Do you have like data on it? I'd easily be swayed in either direction.
Yeah, I'll send some data.
Please.
I don't think it's relevant how frequent it is, though, right? Because the point is that it does happen.
Yeah.
And so when it does happen, it means that it means that person was, under your worldview anyway, it means that person was justified in letting that happen, because if they were able to let it happen, they were justified after the fact, I should say, because if they were able to let that happen, that means that God must have had a plan in mind for that event to take place, in which case they can be like, well, I didn't fix it, which means that God wanted it to happen, because otherwise God would have made something else fix it, which means that I'm justified in not stopping it after the fact.
Yeah.
No, I see the issue now. Okay, so I think what I was thinking that I was like holding some predeterminist view. I wasn't, right? Firstly, when it comes to theism, if I was a theist, I'll just hold to the view of I'd hold to a theory of time. So like obviously,
that's just obviously false.
Pardon?
That's just obviously false.
Okay, I'm still holding it.
Did you say if you were a theist?
If I was a theist, yeah, I'm not a theist.
You are not a theist.
Well, I'm agnostic, but I'm trying to give a case for theism.
This fucking guy.
I mean, it's fine, I guess.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like an interesting convo, but sure. What were you saying?
Yeah, so the future
something about a theory.
Yeah, a theory.
Yeah, the future and the past wouldn't exist, and God only knows the things that exist. So God wouldn't know the future of the past. Obviously, like again, it's like Laplace's theorem and say God knows the future by virtue of the present. But I wouldn't say all that.
Sure. So then, how do you deal with like the time dilation? The fact that like for like one observer's present can be another observer's future simultaneously. Like, how would you account for that fact?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, then it just seems like we have a really good piece of evidence against a theory.
Well, all they'll be saying is that a theory is insufficient for explaining that phenomenon, so it would have an explanatory gap. So if you like want to do an abductive case, then sure, because it would be a worse explanation. But I'm sure there's going to be other theoretical virtues where it went out on. For instance, maybe like parsimony, for instance, some other theoretical virtue.
So a theory can't account for observations that we see in the real world, so it's pretty dead, right?
Well, it's less explanatory power, but I'm saying there's other theoretical virtues that went out on.
Like what?
If you have a theory that fails to explain the things that we see in the world around us, in fact, that contradicts the observations that we have, why would you ever consider holding to that?
Well, what I heard was the failure to explain. Like I didn't hear the contradiction part. So
yeah, I know. So in particular, there's data that we have on things like relativity of simultaneity, which a theory suggests shouldn't be possible. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be able to have relative simultaneity, for example.
Okay, so if like let's say there's like a theory or like a formal system that has like maybe that has something that's incongruent with reality.
Oh wait,
that
Justin, I'm bringing you back up on TikTok, useful. By the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, you were saying, Duke?
Yeah. So if you were just so I know I'm understanding. You're saying that if a theory or formal system, whatever, like maybe like had some commitment or theorem or whatever that's incongruent with reality, it would be less useful due to that incongruence, correct? Such as a theory.
Oh, yeah. I'm saying that we shouldn't that we should basically throw it away
because it's like incongruence. Like mathematics then, like certain mathematical views.
Only if you hold that the mathematics is in some way supposed to represent reality. A lot of mathematicians recognize that the mathematics they do doesn't have anything to do with reality, in which case it's more like a chess game. But if you're trying to say that like a theory of time is true of our reality, and then you make a prediction from that hypothesis of a theory that is incongruent with our reality, then your hypothesis fails, right?
I understand, but I think this instrumentalist view, like I'm assuming this is like some instrumentalist view based on like utility of the concept or utility of the forms of what utility of the hypothesis, is kind of dangerous because it still applies to a lot of things that we currently use, like math. For instance, like the Banach-Tarski paradox is highly incongruent with reality,
No,
but we still use like mathematics.
No,
Sorry,
but
go ahead.
you're making a I don't want to say it's a category error, but it's close to it because the category of mathematics, at least from the point of view of many mathematicians, not all, the class of objects that you study in mathematics are explicitly not those objects that necessarily have anything to do with the real world, right?
Yeah,
But
I'm aware.
the class of objects that you study, the class of theories that you study, when trying to describe the universe, are supposed to be things that have to do with the universe. So,
Yes.
this, and it's not even an instrumentalist point of view, but even if it is, it doesn't apply to math because the category in which math occupies is just not taking the instrumentalist point of view, right?
But you're just saying like we ought hold some view based on the utility, and obviously because of the A theory hypothesis,
Not
the
on the
incongruent
utility,
reality
just
has
on the
less utility.
correctness, just on the correctness, right?
But it's not. But you're saying it's a contradiction with empirical data, but the empirical data could just be false. So obviously, it wouldn't be like a
Oh, okay.
contradiction.
I
With
mean,
a
I
logical.
guess, yeah. I guess, yeah. If that's the
So
point.
it wouldn't be like something like a.
Sure.
It wouldn't be as strong as like a logical contradiction. More so be saying, well, it's incongruent with empirical data, which is false, like a bunch of nomological laws. So I'm just saying that if we wanted to like use this line of reasoning for all things, like I think maths is in a slight issue as well.
Nobody's saying that you should use it for all things, but you should use it for theories that you have about the natural world.
Okay, but don't we use math? Don't we try and use math in some instances to describe things in the natural world?
Some parts of math, yeah, not all of it.
Okay,
Math's
so
much broader than the natural world.
Sure, but if you're a mathematical physicist and you're like, presumably Banach-Tarski paradox would pose an issue for you because that's highly incongruent, like with physics, for instance.
Banach-Tarski makes some of the axioms, or I suppose hypotheses involved in the Banach-Tarski theorem, are not hypotheses that are consistent with the real world. So it just doesn't apply to the real world, right?
Okay.
Like objects are made out of quanta, so you can't like infinitely divide things. So you can't have uncountable things making up a finite sized object, for example.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I can understand like what your issue with a theory of time, but I guess I could just like default to some middle knowledge view. But like God wouldn't have knowledge of the future. Even in that case, God wouldn't know what the entailments are of your actions, but He would at least know what you ought to do based on the consequence. He would say you ought to do X based on the based on the consequentialist view. And if we assume that, obviously this is an internal critique, so if we assume Christianity's eschatology to be true, and we also assume that eschatology is going to be moral, then it would follow that the entailments of all these quote-unquote bad things is actually good because it entails Christianity's eschatology. Therefore, there's not really any bad things per se under this view.
So I guess there's like a couple of things to unpack here. The first is that this is like just like a very direct, like we have to throw out like category, and you might be fine with this. Like the Christian might have no issue with this, but you have to like throw out like basic moral intuitions related to like categorical imperative stuff. Like you have to throw out like that it's wrong to use people as means to ends, because at that point God would just be using all of us as like means to the end of just like producing more good. Like God just uses us as like tools to produce good, as opposed to like individual specimens who He like loves and respects as like ends in and of themselves. But the Christian might be fine with like saying like that's fine. God does just fucking use us.
What's the contradiction there, though?
I don't know. I find it unintuitive that a perfectly moral being is just going to use us as tools. Like that just doesn't seem very intuitive to me.
It also does kind of contradict the Christian the Christian worldview, right? Like the notion of the Christian worldview is that God values all of us, right? So it seems incongruent, at least. Maybe not a contradictory, but at least incongruent.
I can see how it can seem concurrent, but you could just say like I guess like God's like value judgments are based on our utility, so it's having usefulness to make some value us. That wouldn't really be an issue. Like maybe some aesthetic issue, but it wouldn't be a contradiction or even an incongruence in that view, I guess. But this applies to the prior argument. There was really no contradiction in saying that like God says He ought not do X, and we may think doing X is good. Like that's not really an issue.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, do you take it that evidential problems of evil are attempting to reason to a contradiction?
No.
Then what's the problem with them not reaching a contradiction?
Because the other parts you're referring to were to do with contradictions. You're saying that there's some contradiction listed by us sharing a moral
it's like more
institution.
evidential problems, right? Like it's evidentially unlikely or it's evidentially surprising that God just like uses us as tools like towards like some end that in the Christian view we're literally created towards the end. We're not ends in and of ourselves. We're ends towards like the end of like glorifying God. Plus, I mean, if you were LARPing as like a Christian, this actually just becomes like a million times easier. God says and does like morally reprehensible and like completely utterly indefensible things in the Bible.
That's a category, like you're using your own like non-meta ethical views of the Christian view. But obviously, you're not doing contradictions, though, to be fair. So look, the reason why I was asking about contradictions earlier was because you were saying that it's unexpected under the omnibenevolent. You should be assuming some set of normative ethics which Christianity doesn't hold to. That was my main issue with it.
Well, then it just seems like our moral intuitions don't track onto anything because my moral intuitions are screaming that like killing children, like commanding the Israelites to slaughter the Amalekite babies, that this is wrong. So at that point, I just have to give up the idea that I know anything about morals, right? Like at that point, I just don't know anything about ethics.
Yeah. Also, Genesis 3 clearly states that mankind knows right and wrong now.
Well, written in their hearts. Is that the one you're referring to? I think it's
No,
Romans, right?
Genesis 3 says that when they ate from the fruit, their eyes were opened and they became like God, knowing good and evil.
Well, we know that's false because we have like distinct moral intuitions.
That's what I'm saying. According to Genesis 3, we have moral intuitions.
That
Oh, yeah,
are
but
true, or at least point towards truth, right?
point towards. I think it's much more plausible that it points towards truth. But then that gives like a case that if it points towards truth, I think we both think I think we all think it's intuitive that everyone agrees that majority of people agree that you should not rape people. If someone's getting raped, you should probably like interact. It's probably stop the interaction. Then it would follow that due to that, it's actually true that we ought to stop rapes or ought to stop things that decrease well-being.
But if we ought to do those things, like if we have the intuition that we ought to stop those things because they're bad, then it's problematic that the God is causing those things to happen.
Well, is he directly causing them or indirectly causing them?
Both.
Both. Huh? Wait.
Well, sometimes an earthquake happens in such a way that you fall on and off of something repeatedly.
Well, that's a natural evil, though, so that wouldn't really be an issue.
Well, so also there are instances in the Bible where God does just straight up like sentence people to getting raped, or like God just straight up like facilitates like child sex trafficking.
What? Sorry, what verse is that?
It's Numbers 31.
Oh, Numbers 31 for sure.
Okay. Numbers 31. What? Sorry, what verse? The whole thing?
Yeah. So I don't know, Justin. Do you want to explain the story?
Yeah. In Numbers 31, there's a group of people that are being dedicated to destruction because it caused the Israelites to sin. And so Moses commands them to go and slaughter all the people. But he gets upset because they don't actually slaughter all of the people. They actually capture some of them. And so what happens is Moses, Eleazar, and God decide that what we're going to do then was we're going to kill all the boys. It says in verse 15, have you allowed all the women to live? These women here, on Balaam's advice, made the Israelites act treacherously against the Lord in the affair of Peor, so that the plague came upon the congregation of the Lord. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man by sleeping with him. But all the young girls who have not known a man by sleeping with him, keep alive for yourselves. And then they henceforth divide the little virgin girls among the warriors and the priests.
I
Okay.
don't know. I think like if you were to LARP as a theist, like being a Christian, like any of the ones that have a book, like I don't know. I just LARP as like a nondescript theist if I were you.
Yeah. I mean, I could argue it,
but more specifically, you shouldn't LARP as anybody because it's annoying. Just saying.
True.
Okay. I mean, I did say initially that I was agnostic. I'm pretty sure.
No.
Yeah. He came in being honest at least. But listen, it's 2:00 and we're just past our end point, and so we can't.
Should we bring on Wyatt, or do we have a hard cutoff?
I do. I don't know about you guys.
Okay,
you guys can
we have a hard
go.
cutoff. Well, I don't have a lot of time. I need to eat dinner at some point. But, Wyatt seems very desperate, so.
Yeah. Hey, Duke, thanks for coming up. It was a pleasure to talk to you. You're very intelligent and very, like, informed. You've clearly read, like, a lot on this.
All right, appreciate it. Have a good day, guys.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Hey, how's it going? Fuck. Do we super chats first?
Wyatt? Well, no, we can do that at the end. But if Justin has to leave, how do we... Justin's not currently manager, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
I'm
Ian's
doing
running,
stuff.
so you can just delete me.
Okay.
Will do.
Get me the flood. I'll be out of here soon.
Don't threaten me with a good time. No, I'm kidding. Hey, how's it going, Wyatt?
Don't threaten me with a
Good.
number
How are you
31
guys? Can you hear me?
Yep, doing well,
We
doing
can hear
well.
you.
All right. So, let me just preface by saying I'm a Christian.
I would have never guessed from your reactions.
Well, could you guys see my face during that whole thing?
Yes, that whole time.
That's hilarious. All right. Yeah, I felt like Duke was getting way off track with a lot of stuff, but I would say that you can't obviously you can't really prove much of anything. Like there's evidence and we come to conclusions based on evidence. And so I would say that because I'm a Christian, like faith is like obviously central to my beliefs. Like it's not possible without faith, but I do believe that there is evidence for God's existence. And I think there's a lot of it.
Can you give us your best example?
Yeah. I would say I have a couple points, and I'm just.
Which one's the
I
best?
I didn't prepare anything, but I'll just say.
You had so much time.
The best one.
That's okay. I'm sorry. We're being mean. Yeah, go for it.
I know you don't have that much time. I'm sorry, but the best one I have would be. I would say life cannot come from non-life.
Okay.
Oh, that's not a good one. You should have chosen a different one.
Yeah. Wait. Do you think
Why not?
God is alive?
Yes, but not in the same sense as us. He doesn't have a body.
Well, then life doesn't come from life in the same sense of the word life.
Okay, God's a creator, so He created the laws of the universe, including physics. He gave us the gift of reason and logic.
What's the evidence for
That's
that?
part of. Well, okay. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but
That's okay.
It's okay.
I don't
So-
think. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention the whole life can't come from non-life thing. So when we say that, we're making a claim about biology, right? This is at least one of the claims that people make, that like when we say life can't come from non-life, what we mean is that in order to produce organisms with cells, it has to come from other organisms with cells.
Right.
And so when you say life can't come from non-life, well, if you say that, yeah, God is alive and therefore God can produce life, then what you're really saying is that God is an organism with cells. But you don't mean that.
No, I don't mean that.
So both you and I believe that life, organisms made of cells, can come from things that are not organisms made of cells.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I'll go with that. So obviously there was a beginning of organisms with cells. There was a beginning of biological life. But that the chances of that happening by random collection of chemicals and molecules becoming proteins and stuff is like it's so ridiculously like it's a ridiculous notion to me.
Well, it's good. It's a good thing that there's, the probability is probably pretty low, but it's a good thing that the universe is
That
so
the universe
big.
is huge.
Yeah,
no,
right. That's just what
I get
we
that.
would expect, right? Like we would expect like a mostly empty universe, and then there's like cool life things happening on some of the planets.
I don't know. I think it's impossible. I think that if you look at the complexity of the living cell and just how many different types of amino acids you have to form one single protein, like literally dozens and dozens of amino acids to make one protein, and there are so many essential proteins for even the simplest life forms. I think that points towards an intelligent design, and I think that all these things just they can't come from nothing. And I would also
We don't think that they
another
came from
point-
nothing. To be clear, we think that they came
Okay.
from like evolutionary processes.
Okay, sure, but obviously, like I could keep going and say like what happened before that, what happened before that. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah, I mean, we could give you like
it would get to a point where you wouldn't be able to answer because we just don't know.
Oh, well, that's right. But like, we could give you like explanations, right? Like, I could give you an explanation that is like the same level of evidence. Well, so to be clear, like all the stuff related to evolution is going to have just like unfathomably more, like unfathomably greater order of magnitudes of evidence. Fuck, my making sentences is hard.
No, you're good.
There's
Wyatt,
like
do you
there's just
believe that evolution took place?
I believe in natural selection and kind of the micro evolution, quote unquote.
So then we have things way earlier to talk about than the origins of life, right?
That comes first, wouldn't it?
Well, right, so our whole argument, our whole understanding of the origins of life, kind of requires that you first accept that evolution is a thing. Because otherwise, why would you? Why were we even having a discussion about like life needing to form in the form of single cells to begin with, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that you guys would even be able to come up with a reasonable argument for even single-celled life, much less complex beings like ourselves. That's why I think that there's an intelligent designer who, in his infinite creativity, um, created us, put us together the way we are.
I mean, so would it sway you at all to know that biologists are the least likely among scientists to believe in God?
Okay.
I mean, so whoever's going to know the most about how cellular life could form, those would be biologists. And the fact that they're the least likely to believe in God should at least give you some pause, right? Because if they thought it was impossible, surely they would believe in God more.
I mean, there are
less.
still. Well, I think that maybe the more you discover about things, the more polarizing it would be with a group of people. I think that there are Christian biologists out there.
Yeah, we agree.
Right. I'm just saying as a group among scientists. So scientists as a whole are less religious than the general population, less likely to believe in God. But
by the way,
even
I don't
among
believe-
scientists, biologists are even less religious.
Okay.
Less
Well, I
likely
don't
to
believe
in God.
science and God are separate. I don't like.
Are you sure?
I don't have a. Oh, I'm sure. I'm positive. I don't have a problem with science at all. I think that's the way that we discover
Just
God's creation.
evolution and biochemistry and the Big Bang, maybe.
Yeah, I don't believe in the Big Bang either.
So you don't have a problem with science, except astrophysics, cosmology, biochemistry, and evolutionary biology, and geology, presumably.
Well, listen, all these different branches of science that you're bringing up, like, those are all like they're different branches of science, and we don't. I don't know how to say this.
You're good.
Sorry, guys, but
you're good.
I can bring up my other argument if you want.
Sure, whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
I would say, like moral, like a moral code, moral objectivity. I don't know how.
But God's a subject,
Like,
so what?
would you guys say that you
objective
base your
morals?
morals on like? Say that again.
You don't have God's a subject. You don't have objective morals.
I do. I base my morals on the Bible.
But God's a subject, so the morals would be subjective.
What do you mean by God is a subject?
So a subject is literally just an agent, right? Like a mind. For morals when we say morals are subjective, what we're saying is that they're mind dependent. To say that they're objective, we're saying that they're mind independent. Presumably, your morals are dependent on the mind of God.
Well, I believe that God is perfect.
Yeah.
So
but
what's the problem with that?
They're still going to be subjective.
Okay, if God sets the rules, if I believe in God and I believe that God sets the rules and I believe that God's perfect and all knowing and he created everything that exists in the way that he wanted to, that's what's the how is that like?
So your morals are still just going to be subjective, right? So it sounds like you're just going to have subjective morals either way.
The way to see this, by the way. Oh, we can't hear you anymore.
You did something to your mic.
I'm hungry.
Did you say that you're hungry?
I did.
You'll get food after you fucking perform, Blitz.
We still can't hear you, Wyatt. I don't know where you went. Maybe it was a.
For just
maybe it's
$2 a
sign.
day, you can feed a Dr. Blitz near you.
It's
wait,
true,
are we
but
good now?
actually oh, we're good now.
Okay,
So
shoot.
Wyatt, one good way to see that this morality that you have is still subjective is just
Yeah.
ask: could God make something else good? Could God deem something else evil?
He set good and evil from the beginning. Anything
Right.
that
But could he, like tomorrow, could he be like, as of today, if you don't give 5% of your income to charity, that is evil.
No.
Could he do that? He couldn't.
no,
Then it
God
seems
is
like-
unchanging.
Then it seems like you have a problem with all powerful. If
Well,
he couldn't.
Also, it seems like you run
No,
into
that's
like
not
just
true.
like insane shit in the Old Testament, right? Like you're then thusly committed to saying that like slavery is fine
No.
because God says that
God-
you can do slavery in the Old Testament. So presumably you'd still have to be.
So there's a lot of like just misinterpretations of the Bible, and like I've read the Bible a couple times, but I'm not like, I consider myself pretty knowledgeable about it, but I'm not like, I don't have the whole thing memorized. So if you guys have like preloaded like stuff that you
Yeah.
already know, like,
So I'll
this
read it for you.
specific verse says this, huh?
Yeah. Leviticus 25, verse 44. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. Seems pretty endorsey of slavery.
You said
Leviticus
Leviticus 25?
Yeah, verse 44.
So obviously slavery is wrong. And then obviously our American conception of slavery is super influenced by American slavery, like in the 16 to 1800s,
But all slavery is
which
wrong,
is
right?
like by far the most brutal, worst version of slavery probably ever.
But we agree all slavery is wrong, right?
Yes.
So then any form of slavery that's allowed in the Bible is bad.
Yeah, but the thing is, God allows, when you say that God allowed the slavery, any form.
No, he tells you how to do it, right?
He's giving them a social code to live by. Why
He's
by
saying
what
they
was
are
in
to
the
come from the
surrounding
nations
what was
around you.
already acceptable.
Well, I mean, that's not clear at all, by the way, because these laws were given during the exile, so there were no surrounding nations. They hadn't established a nation yet. The language used here, the from the nations around you, the word there would be like goyim, if I remember correctly, and that just means essentially foreigners.
I can verify this as somebody who's been subject to a lot of neo-Nazi attacks. That is indeed the word.
Well, oh, he left. That is the word. I just don't know if that's actually the word that's used here in Leviticus.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I know what goyim means. I'm allowed to use the G word, by the way.
Yeah, that's
All right, well, we should do super chats then.
True. Yeah. All right. Who was the last one?
I think it was Jay Clark. No, it was.
Oh yeah, I'm
it
up
was
today. I'm up.
Gymnastics
I'm up. Cameron,
Yeah.
thanks so much for the $5. Different brand of autism. I love Ian's mind-blowing sense of humor. In quotes for some reason. Thank you so much, Cameron. I appreciate it. Optimus Rhymes, thank you so much for the $2. Or Ortho Bros are sovereign citizens of debating.
That's so true.
That is true. That is true. I love that. I don't know. I'm like a big fan. I'm a big fan of like presuppositionalist nonsense where it's like, how do you know your sense data is accurate? I don't know, man. The same way you knew your sense data was accurate when you picked up the Bible and read the words, It's whatever you appeal to justify that is the same thing that I'll appeal to justify my thing. This argument can just be run in like both directions. But thank you so much, Optimus Rhymes. Jay Clark, thanks so much for the $5. I have my Physics 1 Classic Mechanics final next week. Wish me luck. Dr. Blitz, do you want to bless Jay
Good
Clark?
luck.
Yes.
Science be upon you.
Yes, you've been blessed. You've been blessed. Garba Gay Man, thank you so much for the 10 Canuck bucks. Now that Justin is gone, can you guys split this super chat?
Nah, it gets split 3-way anyway.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Them's the rules.
Yep.
Them's the rules.
Of course. We would never.
All right. Ian, you gonna go do a live?
No. I have like a person over. I've been cruelly making her wait while I live stream.
Ooh. I've also been making a woman wait, but she's hungry, and so we're going to Popeyes.
Okay. Well,
they just opened one here.
All right. I will see you all later.
Terminate the live. Later, everybody.
Bye-bye.